Divorce. When Li Boyan threw the divorce papers in front of her, Wan Qingwan finally realized, truly and painfully, that this marriage already in name only had come to an end. Her almond-shaped eyes turned red as she held back the tears threatening to overflow. She glared at the man she loved deeply, her voice hoarse beyond recognition. Why? Give me a reason. In truth, she knew very well didn't love her. Their marriage had been nothing more than a product of mutual benefit, void of any affection. But she just couldn't let go. They had been married for 3 years, and she had loved him for 6. How could she give up so easily? Li Boyan's handsome face darkened slightly. Upon hearing her question, a mocking smirk tugged at his thin lips. His obsidian black eyes locked onto hers. You want a reason? Wan Qingwan, you're just as fake and hypocritical as ever. As he finished speaking, he threw a magazine at her. The sharp edge of the cover sliced a thin cut across her cheek. It hurt, but not even a fraction as much as her heart did. Before she could even open the magazine, his cold voice struck her ears again. Are you seriously going to say you weren't the one who leaked the news of Yinyan's divorce to the media? And the domestic violence remorse area woman too, and yet you're that vicious? Disgusting. Every word was like a knife stabbing into her heart, only to be cruelly twisted and pulled out, leaving her bleeding emotionally. The flood of tears she had been holding back finally burst free. Su Yanqi was his white moonlight, the unforgettable woman in his heart. Even though she had married someone else, her place in his heart remained untouchable. And Wan Qingwan? She had held the title of Mrs. Li for 3 years, but in his eyes, she wasn't even worth the dust at his feet. All she could be was the villainess in their tragic love story. How ironic. She slowly bent down and picked up the torn divorce agreement. Right in front of him, she ripped it into shreds, piece by piece. Then, looking him straight in his hate-filled eyes, she enunciated clearly, believe it or not, I had nothing to do with that. As for the divorce, unless I'm dead, it's not happening. Her father's company was struggling, and divorcing now would only add fuel to the fire. It would be a complete disaster. So even if it meant losing her pride, she had to endure. He let out a cold laugh, leaned down, and gripped her delicate chin with force. Tear it all you want. There are plenty more copies of the divorce agreement in the drawer of the study. Whether this marriage ends or not, it's up to me. With that, he released her, took 2 steps back, his thick brows furrowed as though he had just touched something filthy. He meticulously wiped his fingers with an expensive pocket square and then casually tossed it into the trash before walking away without looking back. Through tear-filled eyes, she watched his cold, heartless figure disappear into the distance. In the end, she had lost completely. The next day, her mother-in-law called, inviting them over for dinner. Even though she didn't want to go, Wan Qingwan had no choice but to agree. She tried calling Li Boyan, but his secretary answered, informing her that President Li was busy and had no time for her. At this point, he didn't even bother to pretend anymore. After hanging up, she pushed down all her emotions, applied light makeup, and headed to the old Li family residence. When her mother-in-law Lin Yu saw that she had come alone, she looked surprised. Where's Boyan? Wan Qingwan forced a smile. Her mouth was bitter, but her face betrayed nothing. He's been really busy at work lately and couldn't get away. Lin Yu stared at her until she felt so uncomfortable that goosebumps rose on her skin. Only then did he look away and said flatly, come in. When it was time to eat, her silent and stern father-in-law sat at the head of the table. Her mother-in-law sat across from her, face tense and clearly displeased. The table was full of delicious dishes, but to her, everything tasted like wax. Back when they had just gotten married, her father's company was still at its peak and had provided significant help to the Li family. At the time, Lin Yu had always treated her with courtesy, greeting her with a warm smile. But now? She could only watch his face carefully to decide what to say or do. Before long, Li Qian finished eating first and went upstairs to the study. As soon as he left, her mother-in-law cleared her throat and asked, how's your company doing lately? Do you need us to inject some funds? She could easily hear the probing tone behind the question. Meeting her gaze squarely, she replied calmly, it's fine. We can manage the cash flow. Lin Yu nodded, a sharp glint flashing in her eyes. Then, as if casually, she asked, so, when are you going to give me a grandchild? The mention of children made Wan Qingwan panic. She had always used Li Boyan's busy schedule as an excuse to deflect the topic. But who would have thought that after 3 years of marriage, her hymen was still intact? Qingwan? Snapping back to her senses, her voice trembled slightly. Mom, we're not in a rush. Not in a rush? Ling Yu slammed her chopsticks on the table and questioned sharply, then how much longer are you planning to wait? I only have one son. He's already 28, and your belly hasn't shown the slightest sign of movement. Do you want the Li family to die out? No, Mom, She tried to explain in a hurry, but was cut off. Qingwan, I understand Boyan's personality too. But can't you at least put in some effort? When it comes to winning a man's love, a woman has to use a little strategy. Hearing this, a complicated mix of emotions welled up inside her. She lowered her eyes and obediently said, Mom, I understand. As long as you understand. As she was about to leave, her mother-in-law handed her a paper bag and said, make good use of what's inside. If you still can't get pregnant this year, I won't be able to help you anymore. Absent-mindedly, she accepted it. Back home, she opened it to find several sets of sexy lingerie and perfume. So this was what she meant by strategy? Wan Qingwan couldn't help but smile bitterly. That night, after showering, she sat on the bed playing with her phone. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of the paper bag. Her heart stirred. After hesitating for a while, she ended up putting on one of the more modest black lace sets and sprayed on a bit of perfume. Looking at her reflection in the mirror beautiful face, graceful curves her emotions sank even further. So what if she looked good? He still wouldn't spare her a single glance. She turned off the lights and got ready for bed when suddenly the sharp sound of the doorbell echoed through the empty villa. Who could it be at this hour? She instinctively ruled out Li Boyan would never set foot in this place unless it was absolutely necessary. She threw on a robe and got out of bed. As she reached the first floor, she heard a voice urgently calling out, Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. Please open the door. The voice sounded like the assistant who was always by Li Boyan's side. Peering through the peephole, she saw it was indeed him and he was supporting an unconscious Li Boyan. Her heart clenched. Without a second thought, she opened the door. The assistant said, Thank goodness you opened the door. Mr. Li is drunk. I was worried something might happen, so I brought him back. So he was just drunk. She let out a quiet breath of relief and carefully took the completely inebriated man from the assistant. Thank you for your trouble, she said. The door closed again, and Wan Qingwan supported him with difficulty as they made their way to the sofa. To be honest, this was the first time she had been so close to him. The strong smell of alcohol filled her nose, and faintly, she could also detect the mix of his cologne and tobacco. Everything about it was intoxicating. If he sobered up and found out that she had touched him, he would surely fly into a rage, mock her coldly, and storm out, wouldn't he? As her thoughts drifted wildly, Li Boyan suddenly leaned in and sniffed at the crook of her neck, muttering something under his breath. She didn't catch it, nor did she care much. Carefully, she began to remove his shoes and socks, then loosened his tie. It should have been the simplest of actions, yet her hands were trembling uncontrollably. When she began unbuttoning his shirt, she could almost hear the thunderous pounding of her own heart. Thump, thump, thump. It was unusually loud. Suddenly, Li Boyan's lips moved, as if saying something again. She leaned down, placing her ear next to his lips, trying to hear more clearly only for him to suddenly take her earlobe into his mouth. The wet sensation sent tiny electric shocks surging through her body. Li. She had just uttered his name when a force gripped her waist. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto him. His scent enveloped her, becoming the most intoxicating poison, leaving her helplessly addicted. With her body pressed against his warm chest, the steady thump of his heartbeat echoed in her ears. It was the closest she had ever felt to him, and Wan Qingwan wished time would freeze at that moment. But just as the unrealistic thought crossed her mind, she felt the world spin. The next thing she knew, Li Boyan had flipped her over and pinned her beneath him. She looked up in panic, her gaze meeting his ink-dark eyes. In the dim light, she couldn't make out his expression. Her heart pounded wildly, and she could almost guess the ridicule that was about to spill from his thin lips. It took her a while to find her voice. She spoke with difficulty, You're drunk. I was just trying to help you lie down. He didn't respond. The silence was suffocating. She couldn't bear the tension and began to push against his firm chest, trying to get up. But he gripped her jaw tightly, and his alcohol-laced lips descended on hers, his overbearing presence flooding her mouth. The overwhelming intimacy teased every fragile nerve in her body. She knew this was just drunken lust, yet she still couldn't stop herself from falling deeper. She loved this man far too deeply. With Lee Boyan's every movement, waves of pleasure crawled up her spine, tingling and addictive. At the final moment, he entered her forcefully, his thin lips brushing against her ear as he murmured. In that instant, the blood in her body seemed to freeze. Her limbs turned cold not because of the pain from their first time, but because she had finally heard what name he whispered. Yan Yan. 2 lines of tears streamed down from the corners of her eyes. She hated herself, hated how she had lost her mind, how foolishly she had dreamed. After being tormented the whole night, Wan Qingwan suddenly woke from her sleep. Just a slight movement sent a tearing pain from below. Her muddled mind instantly cleared. Memories rushed back, and the anger and helplessness from the previous night surged up once more. She had slept with Li Boyan only to be mistaken for Su Yan. That cruel truth clenched her heart so tightly, even breathing hurt. In a daze, she heard footsteps approaching. She sat up abruptly. Before her eyes could focus, a strong hand wrapped tightly around her neck. Her breath caught. Her face flushed red. A mocking voice rang out, Wan Qingwan, you really are something. Li Boyan's dark eyes were icy and cold, his entire body radiating intense hostility. He resembled a violent beast, as if he would tear her apart in the next second. So desperate you couldn't wait to climb into my bed? She couldn't utter a single word in retort. The oxygen in her lungs was running out, and she was about to suffocate. In her struggle, the only thing covering her body fell away, revealing skin covered in red marks suggestive and enticing. Li Boyan's gaze darkened. He immediately released her, his expression full of disgust. Didn't get enough last night? Trying to seduce me again? Hearing this, she didn't know where the strength came from, but she slapped him hard across the face. A loud smack echoed as pain flared in her palm. She glared at him with all her might, but tears still streamed uncontrollably down her face. Why? Why did he have to humiliate her like this? She was the victim he had mistaken her for Su Yan. After being slapped, Li Boyan froze for a moment. Then a storm of rage erupted. He grabbed her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at him, teeth clenched as he growled, still pretending to be some virtuous woman? As he spoke, he pointed at the scattered sexy lingerie on the floor and sneered, I never knew you could be this slutty. Shame and fury welled up inside her. She couldn't hold it in and shouted, Li Boyan, you bastard. But he completely ignored her anger. He pulled out a bottle of perfume from somewhere and threw it at her feet. Don't tell me you didn't know this is the brand Yan Yan has always loved. No wonder he kept sniffing her neck last night, it was because of the perfume. From the lingerie to the perfume, all the evidence was stacked against her. She had no way to explain. While she was still in a daze, the housekeeper walked over and handed a white bottle of pills to Li Boyan. His face darkened as he poured a few pills into his hand and shoved them into her mouth. His voice was cold and firm, swallow them. In that moment, she clearly saw the words on the bottle, birth control pills. Wan Qingwan, let me tell you, don't even think about getting pregnant with my child in this lifetime. Before she could react, cold water was forced into her throat, washing the pills down into her stomach, extinguishing her last shred of hope. Li Boyan left, leaving behind only the housekeeper's scornful expression. She bit her lip hard, swallowing all her tears and humiliation. Then, dragging her exhausted body, she went upstairs to wash up. But when she came back down, to her shock, she saw her mother-in-law sitting on the sofa, frowning at the bottle of pills in her hand. That bottle. She panicked and rushed to explain, Mom, this isn't what it looks like. Before she could finish, the pill bottle flew toward her and struck her hard near the eye, making her nose sting with pain. Her mother-in-law's furious voice rang in her ears, I knew it. 3 years and no sign of a child, turns out you've been taking this. What a disgrace. Her vision blurred. Covering her eye, she mumbled, Mom, I never meant to take it. It was Boyan who forced me. Her voice choked up at the mention of the painful truth. And now you're blaming Boyan again? Her mother-in-law became even more enraged, jabbing a finger at her nose. The Li family has treated you well, yet just because Boyan has someone else in his heart, you want to cut off our bloodline? Wan Qingwan, I never thought you could be so vicious. She still wanted to explain, but her mother-in-law wouldn't listen at all. With hatred in her voice, she snapped, whatever you say now is useless. If you still can't get pregnant within half a year, just wait for the divorce. Then she shot her a fierce glare and stormed out. She collapsed onto the sofa, her eyes losing focus. Why? Why was everyone pressuring her? What had she done wrong? These past few days, she had only shared good news with her parents, hiding all the bad. She was afraid her emotional state would affect them. There was already enough pressure from work, she couldn't add to their worries. But what she didn't expect was that on a hot afternoon, Li Boyan would actually take the initiative to message her and ask her out for lunch. She stared at the message sender over and over, just to make sure it really was from Li Boyan. Could it be a prank? No, that wasn't like him, wasn't that childish? So should she go? After a long internal struggle, she finally decided to go. She even put on some light makeup, carefully covering the scar at the corner of her eye. With a nervous heart, she arrived at the agreed-upon restaurant. She looked around, but didn't see any sign of the man. She gave a bitter, disappointed smile. What was she even hoping for? She knew very well he despised her, yet she still came running like a fool. If he found out, he'd probably call her pathetic again. Just as she turned to leave, a gentle female voice called from behind, Miss Ruan, please wait. She turned around and froze completely. It was Su Yan, the woman Li Boyan had always longed for. In that moment of stunned disbelief, the other woman had already walked up to her, a graceful yet polite smile on her lips. I knew I wouldn't be able to invite you myself, so I used Boyan's phone to send the message. I hope you don't mind. So it was her. Which meant she had been with him recently? Wan Qingwan slowly clenched her palms, her nails digging deep into her skin as she forced herself to crawl out of the shock and sorrow, suppressing all her emotions and asking as calmly as she could, Miss Su, what can I do for you? Seeing her calm and composed expression, Su Yan's smile stiffened for a brief second, but quickly returned to normal. She gestured to the seat beside her and said, it's a long story. Let's sit down and talk. No way she was going to sit down and have a long talk with her romantic rival. Wan Qingwan's face turned cold. Sorry, I don't have much time. 5 minutes, tops. Su Yan suddenly smiled, a sorrowful, pitiful smile. I know you look down on me, but Boyan and I truly love each other. Her expression remained unchanged, though inside she was already a mess. What's that got to do with me? Su Yan lowered her eyes. But I don't want to see your marriage fall apart. Wan Qingwan's brows furrowed deeply. She had no idea what kind of game this woman was playing. Then, Su Yan suddenly looked up, eyes shimmering with tears. So, I decided to let you have him. As she spoke, she actually moved to open the floor-to-ceiling window next to her, intending to jump. Wan Qingwan was startled and rushed to stop her, but in her panic, she pulled too hard and ended up dragging Su Yan down to the floor. Still shaken, Wan Qingwan shouted, don't act like some pitiful saint in front of me, I am not buying it. But when she looked up again, she noticed a bright red stain spreading beneath Su Yan's white dress. So much blood? Could it be? Wan Qingwan's mind went blank, as if something exploded in her head. She stood frozen, completely at a loss. Su Yan's pained groans pierced her ears, and all she could see around her was a shocking, terrifying sea of red. She clearly hadn't used much force. How could this have happened? For a moment, her hands and feet trembled as she reached out to help Su Yan, but before she could even touch her, a sudden, powerful force slammed her aside. Losing her balance, her lower abdomen hit the corner of the table hard, sending a cold sweat down her back from the pain. Through her blurry vision, she saw Li Boyan bend down to pick up Su Yan from the ground, his face unusually panicked as he asked repeatedly, Yan Yan, how do you feel? Don't be afraid, I'll take you to the hospital right away. As he passed by Wan Qingwan, all the tenderness instantly vanished. His hawk-like eyes were filled with cold indifference. If anything happens to Yan Yan, your whole family will pay with their lives. With that, he left without the slightest hesitation. Her eyes felt dry. She was so hurt, so devastated, that she couldn't even shed a single tear. Su Yan was a treasure, and she was nothing but grass. Maybe even if she died, he wouldn't spare her a single glance. How ironic 6 years of her youth had led to this. She sniffled, dragging her weak body outside, but was immediately surrounded by onlookers whispering and pointing at her, their words laced with malice, branding her as a bad woman. Fleeing the crowd in panic, she gave a bitter laugh. Maybe this was the price of blind obsession, both pitiful and ridiculous. For several days in a row, Wan Qingwan barely slept, haunted by the same dream again and again, a woman covered in blood and a man devoid of warmth, scaring her awake every time. That night, at 1 a.m., she jolted awake again, sitting up against the headboard, her heart racing uncontrollably. She poured herself a glass of water and turned on the TV, hoping the noisy chatter would distract her mind. But soon, the rebroadcasted entertainment gossip caught her attention. A bold headline read, "Leisure Group President suspected of cheating, staying day and night in hospital with miscarriage victim." Then, a blurry photo appeared on the screen. It showed Li Boyan's sharply defined side profile as he fed a woman in a hospital bed, a slight smile on his lips, the kind of gentleness she had never dared dream of. Her phone suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up with her best friend's name. Biting her bitter lips hard to suppress the overwhelming sorrow, she answered, "Ayu, what's wrong?" On the other end, sobbing came through the line in broken waves. "Qingwan, I just broke up with someone. Can you come have a drink with me? I feel so awful. I want to die." Her nose began to sting with emotion too. She also needed a release. Maybe alcohol would help, so she agreed right away. She rushed to the bar as fast as she could. Under the hazy lights, she saw Qingyu looking around anxiously. "Qingyu," she called out. Maybe it was her imagination, but for a moment, she thought she saw a flash of delight cross Qingyu's face. Before she could think more about it, the woman was already in front of her. "Qingwan, what took you so long? Come on, let's drink." Without giving her a chance to refuse, Qingyu dragged her to the bar and handed her a prepared drink. "Here, we're not going home until we're drunk tonight." The strong smell of alcohol hit her nose, and Wan Qingwan hesitated. She had always been proper and well-behaved. This was even her first time at a bar, let alone sitting there drinking. But Qingyu didn't give her a chance to refuse. Pressing the rim of the glass to her lips, she said in a low voice, "Qingwan, I just got dumped. Can't you drink one glass with me?" She was also overcome with sorrow, and without hesitation, took the glass of wine and downed it in one gulp. Very soon, her head began to feel dizzy, and her vision turned blurry. Why does this wine have such a strong after effect? She shook her head forcefully, but it didn't help. Just then, Qingyu's voice floated into her ears. "Qingwan, how are you feeling now?" "So dizzy." Before she could finish her sentence, everything went black and she lost consciousness. "Open the door. Open up." Wan Qingwan was jolted awake by a series of urgent knocks on the door. Her head throbbed painfully, and her eyelids felt unbearably heavy. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't open them. Fragments of last night's memories began to resurface. Tentatively, she called out, "Ayu?" At the same time, her right hand reached out to feel around the bed only to touch the bare torso of a man. A jolt ran through her, and her mind instantly cleared. She opened her eyes in shock and, upon seeing the naked man beside her, let out an uncontrollable scream. How could this be? How could she have ended up in bed with a naked man? Could it be? A loud bang interrupted her thoughts. She looked up in panic only to meet the furious eyes of her mother-in-law. The next second, her left cheek was slapped hard, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. A harsh voice rang out. "Wan Qingwan, haven't the Li family treated you well? And yet you're shameless enough to cheat on Bo Yan? So that's why you kept taking birth control pills and couldn't get pregnant. Turns out you've been keeping a lover outside." "Mom, Before she could finish, her right cheek was struck with another slap, making her vision go black. She collapsed onto the bed, unable to get up. "Don't call me Mom. I feel sick. Divorce, I want a divorce immediately," her mother-in-law screamed hysterically, her voice unbearably shrill. At this point, Wan Qingwan finally realized she had been set up and Qingyu was very likely in on it. Why? Why did they have to be so cruel to her? For the first time, she felt true despair, as if she had fallen into the 18th level of hell, with no hope of ever escaping. But the devastation was far from over. Not long after, Lee Boyan arrived. He stopped 2 steps away from her, looking down at her with a cold, mocking smile. "I knew you were cheap, but I didn't think you'd stoop this low sleeping with some random gigolo." "Wan Qingwan, just how desperate are you?" Alongside the disgust in his eyes, there was also an inexplicable hint of irritation. "Bo Yen, let me explain." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to reach for his hand. But he stepped away from her, and she lost her balance, falling hard to the floor beside the bed. Pain shot through every inch of her body. Above her, his cold, emotionless voice rang out. "Wan Qingwan, you disgust me." Disgusting. That cruel word echoed endlessly in her mind. Finally, she hung her head low and let out a broken laugh through her tears. Her frail shoulders trembled uncontrollably. What was she still struggling for? Hoping he'd believe she was innocent? "Don't be foolish, Wan Qingwan. This man never had you in his heart. He couldn't wait to see you broken and begging." With that thought, she slowly raised her head. Her swollen, tear-filled almond eyes locked onto the man she once loved with all her heart. Summoning all her strength, she said word by word, "Lee Boyan, let's just say I was blind to have ever loved you." Seeing her in such a pitiful state only annoyed him further. His voice quickened with impatience. "I'll give you 3 days. Sign the divorce papers. Name any price for the settlement, I don't care. But if you don't cooperate, I'll leak this to the media. You can deal with the consequences." Facing his heartless departing figure, she screamed with all her pain, "Isn't it just a divorce? Fine, I'll give you what you want. The biggest regret of my life, Lee Boyan, was marrying you. I hate you." Those last 3 words made Lee Boyan pause in his steps, but only for a moment. Left alone in the empty room, Wan Qingwan felt as if her soul had been ripped away. Her chest ached, her face turned ashen. It was over. Everything was over. The next morning, Wan Qingwan brought the signed divorce papers to Lee Boyan's company. Tilting her head to look up at the towering, cloud-piercing skyscraper, she let out a bitter smile. 3 years of marriage, and she had never once been here. Who would have thought that her first visit would be to end it all? She took the elevator directly to the executive floor where the CEO's office was located. As soon as she stepped out, a woman who looked like a secretary stopped her and demanded to know why she was there. "I want to see your president, Lee," she said. The woman scoffed disdainfully and gave her a once-over before sneering, "Do you think any stray cat or dog can just meet the president? Get lost." Wan Qingwan stood tall and expressionless. "Tell your president, Lee, that I left something for him at the front desk." With that, she turned and walked away, not wanting to argue. Just as she was about to close the elevator doors, the same secretary came rushing over, panting, telling her that the president would see her now. The words of refusal danced on her tongue, but in the end, she swallowed them. Fine, better to get closure face to face. But reality proved the man was just playing with her. She sat in the CEO's office for nearly an hour, without seeing a trace of Lee Boyan. Every time she was about to lose patience, the secretary would brush her off with, "It'll just be a little longer." After 3 hours, she finally decided to leave. Just as she opened the door, she saw Lee Boyan approaching. Dressed sharply in a suit, he carried a cold aura, and even upon seeing her, his expression didn't change. He asked in a low voice, "Where's the agreement?" She lowered her eyes, hiding the sorrow in them, and said calmly, "On your desk." With that, she moved to walk past him. "Wait," he suddenly called out. Her heart skipped a beat. Her fists clenched by her side, fingernails digging into her palms, using the pain to force herself to stay composed. "What is it?" she asked, though her voice still trembled despite her efforts. Lee Boyan sat by the desk. When he saw the elegant signature in the signature field, his eyes darkened for a moment. An inexplicable irritation surged in his chest, and hurtful words slipped out before he could stop them. "Tell me, how much do you want?" Her eyes burned with tears. She almost broke her with that one sentence. She glared at him and snapped, "Sorry, but I don't want a single cent of your money." He ignored her and continued indifferently, 20 million, how about that?" 20 million was the exact amount the Wan family had lent to the Lee family to help them stay afloat. It was also because of this money that he had been forced to marry Wan Qingwan. To him, it was the root of his humiliation. When she didn't respond, Li Boyan pulled out a check he had prepared in advance and tossed it at her feet, his voice cold, "Take it. From this moment on, the Li family owes you nothing." Wan Qingwan bit her lip hard, refusing to let go even when she tasted blood. Yes, with this 20 million, the Li family owed her nothing. But how was Li Boyan going to repay everything he had taken from her heart? Under his cold and heartless gaze, she slowly bent down to pick up the check from the floor. Then, meeting his eyes filled with mockery, she tore the check to pieces, bit by bit, and flung the scraps into the air. "I told you, I won't take your money, it's filthy." That sentence had exhausted all her courage. Before he could react, she ran out of the building and into the blinding sunlight, tears finally streaming down her face. Before she could even calm down, bad news suddenly came from her parents. Both had fallen ill due to the constant stress over the company. She didn't dare waste time and rushed to the Second People's Hospital. When she entered the hospital room, her parents were still unconscious. The steady beep-beep of the heart monitor struck like a hammer against her chest, leaving her completely unsettled. The doctor said her mother's condition was relatively stable, but her father already had a heart condition, so his situation was more serious. If he suffered another shock, it could be fatal. Terrified, she stayed by their side and decided to put the divorce matter on hold. She couldn't take that risk now. 5 hours later, her mother was the first to wake up. Wan Qingwan immediately went over and asked how she was feeling. Seeing some color had returned to her mother's face, she finally felt a little relieved. "Qingwan." She was peeling an apple, but when she heard her mother call her, she turned around right away only to see a rare look of embarrassment on her face. Her heart sank. She quickly asked what was wrong. "Is Boyan busy lately?" The mention of that man made her eyes flicker involuntarily. She stammered, quite busy." Her mother opened her mouth again, as if the next words were hard to say. After a long struggle, she finally spoke. "Qingwan, could you ask Boyan to lend us some money? If not, the company won't make it." At those words, the fruit knife in her hand slipped and made a deep cut on her index finger. Blood gushed out. Her mother noticed her strange reaction and cautiously asked, "Qingwan, are you hiding something from us?" She forced a smile, her voice faltering. "No, what could I possibly be hiding?" "Right, how much do we need?" "I'll ask Boyan about it later." 20 million. 20 million again. Hiding in the dark stairwell, Wan Qingwan hugged her knees, completely lost. Asking Li Boyan for money, she just couldn't do it. But the company absolutely couldn't go under either. So what could she do? While she was racking her brain, a sudden idea popped into her head. Right, she could try asking the uncles who had always been kind to her in the past. Maybe they could help her out in this emergency. She acted immediately, calling them one by one. Each gave a vague response, saying it would depend on her sincerity. It felt like she saw a glimmer of hope. She quickly offered to treat them to a meal, and they all agreed with a chuckle. She didn't dare tell her parents and found an excuse to head to the agreed location the next afternoon. The dinner was held at the most upscale hotel in M City. Wan Qingwan had deliberately booked a private room with a prime view. After waiting for a bit, the guests began arriving one after another to her delight. If each of them could lend her just 5 million, it would be enough to solve her urgent crisis. As the dishes were served one by one, she was the first to raise her glass. "Thank you, uncles, for being willing to come today. This toast is on behalf of my parents, thank you." After speaking, she raised the glass and downed it in one gulp. The liquor rushed into her stomach, leaving behind a burning sensation. An uncle who used to dote on her chuckled and said, "I've been close friends with your parents for a long time. Of course, I'll help when you're in trouble. But I'm afraid your sincerity still isn't enough." She understood immediately, and raised another glass to toast him. "Then tonight, I'll drink with all you uncles to your heart's content." With that, she downed another shot of strong liquor. The discomfort in her stomach intensified. Luckily, her words brought on hearty laughter from the group. Even through the pain, she felt it was worth it. After 5 or 6 drinks, her body started to sway, and her vision doubled. No good anymore and she'd be drunk. In a daze, she felt a pair of hands slide around her waist. She tried hard to focus her eyes and, upon recognizing the person, quickly stepped back and said, "Uncle Wang, I'm fine, here let's drink again." but the glass was snatched from her hand, and an unsettling chuckle echoed by her ear. "Qingwan, you're certainly trying hard, but this isn't the kind of sincerity we're looking for." Her head was still muddled. She dumbly asked, "Then what do you want?" "Something more practical, of course." As the words fell, a wave of knowing laughter filled the private room. The sudden shift in atmosphere snapped her into clarity. Her smile turned stiff. "I don't quite understand." Then, a few small white pills were placed in front of her eyes. "Take these, and you'll understand." What was this? Alarms blared in her mind. She backed away step by step, reaching the door. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." But before she could touch the doorknob, someone grabbed her wrist. The next second, a sharp pain shot through her jaw, and liquor laced with pills was forced into her mouth. No matter how hard she gagged, she couldn't spit it out. The drugs took effect quickly. Soon, she felt a scorching heat all over her body, like countless ants crawling across her skin. Weakly slumping against the door, she stared in disbelief at the uncles who had moments ago seemed so kind and paternal. Every shred of hope turned into crushing despair. They approached slowly, eyes filled with predatory intent. "Qingwan, borrowing money isn't as easy as you thought. You'll have to pay a price." She gritted her teeth hard, finally seeing through the hypocritical faces of this group. Steeling herself, she said, "Sorry, I'm not lending you anything." But they had no intention of letting her go. One of them reached out to touch her fair cheek, laughing lewdly. "Qingwan, think carefully. Just sleep with us once, and 20 million will be yours." She struggled to dodge their advances, growling, "Don't touch me. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Since you're here today, you're not leaving." With that, they all lunged at her, forcefully tearing at her clothes. She bit one of them hard on the finger, only to be viciously kicked to the ground. Without even having time to cry out in pain, she scrambled up and rushed toward the door, one thought racing through her mind. "No matter what, I absolutely can't let them rape me." Seeing they were about to catch up, she gritted her teeth and shoved open the door of a nearby private room only to come face to face with the relaxed and composed Li Boyan. What kind of damned coincidence was this? Clutching her torn clothing tightly and fighting the rising heat surging from her lower abdomen, she found herself caught in a moment of utter helplessness. A flicker of surprise flashed in Li Boyan's dark eyes, but it was quickly replaced by thick disgust. "Wan Qingwan, have you become a whore now?" As cold and cutting as ever words that once might have stung her heart, but now, they were her only lifeline. Would she rather be assaulted by these beasts in human skin or throw away her pride and beg him for help? She hesitated for a second, but the glimpse of those vile, hypocritical faces behind her made her choice clear. "Li Boyan, just this once I am begging you, please save me." This was the first time she had begged him in 3 years and it would be the last. Li Boyan rose to his feet, looking down at her with a sneer tugging at the corners of his mouth. She had humiliated him, betrayed him, hurt the woman he loved the most. What right did she have to ask for his help? "Sorry, I'm not interested in meddling in other people's business," he said coldly. His indifferent voice exploded in her ears. He set down his cutlery and turned to leave. 3 years of marriage, during which she had dutifully played her role. And now, he wouldn't even lend her a hand? She let out a soft, bitter laugh. Her mouth twisted with irony as her heart turned to ash. She collapsed to the floor in despair. "If you save me, I swear I'll never appear in front of you again. You and Su Yan will never be disturbed." She lay on the floor, clutching the hem of his pants, forcing a desperate, stiff plea from her mouth. This was her final bargaining chip. She couldn't give up so easily. Even if it meant losing all dignity, she had to keep fighting. Li Boyan's back visibly stiffened. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Deal. Deal." Li Boyan had finally agreed. She couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At least there was still someone who could save her, even if it was only for the sake of Su Yan. Propping herself up on her elbows, she dragged herself to a chair and leaned against its cold leg, gasping for breath. Bang! The locked door of the private room was kicked open. A group of men poured in, eyes ravenous as they stared at her delicate body. "Qingwan, don't be scared. Uncle promises not to hurt you." A stubbled middle-aged man rubbed his hands together, his tone teasing and vile. The men behind him roared with laughter and jeered. Anger flared on her face. She grabbed a ceramic flower pot and hurled it at them. The leader sneered, no longer amused. His sharp gaze honed from years of business battles gleamed with impatience. You stupid bitch. You don't know what's good for you. Don't blame me for being rough, then. As she finished speaking, she quickened her pace and rushed forward, only for Li Boyan to step in and block them with his body. The group scowled, cursing viciously. Li Boyan, we've always minded our own business. I advise you not to block your grandfather's path. Scram. Li Boyan's handsome face darkened slightly, a faint trace of murderous intent and threat flickering in his deep eyes as he rolled up the sleeves of his suit. They were all old acquaintances, and naturally wouldn't back down and lose face. Without another word, they charged at Li Boyan and started a fight. A bunch of people with one foot in the grave still dared to go against him? Li Boyan sneered, his lips curving coldly. He raised his hand, grabbed one man's arm, and bent it back toward his neck. The twisted motion made the man break out in a cold sweat from the pain. Within 3 seconds, the bones in his elbow and shoulder made a series of cracking sounds. He immediately collapsed to the ground, half unconscious from the pain. The remaining few, now clearly shaken, had no way out and could only shout as they surrounded him. Li Boyan turned and kicked the fattest one in the temple. The man dropped with a splitting headache, collapsing on top of another person. Without any bodyguards, and in less than 5 minutes, Li Boyan clapped the dust off his hands, having dealt with every one of them, and walked away unscathed. She immediately stood up on trembling legs, bowed slightly, and handed him a towel to wipe his sweat. Li Boyan didn't even glance at her. He raised his hand coldly to push her away. No need. Your things are too filthy. The joy of surviving the ordeal was instantly shattered by his words, dragging her back to the grim reality. He wouldn't give her even a moment of warmth. So ruthless. Thank you. The effects of the drug in her system stirred up waves of heat as she lowered her eyes in guilt and softly expressed her thanks. Li Boyan coldly kicked aside a man still groaning on the ground and walked away without looking back, tossing out a final sentence, I hope you remember your promise to me. She let out a bitter laugh. This had all been just her wishful thinking. She would never bother or entangle herself with him again. Suddenly, her ankle was grabbed. Looking down, she saw it was one of the uncles who still had a bit of consciousness. Her face filled with panic. She hurriedly kicked him away, then, still shaken, grabbed her small purse and ran into the elevator. After settling a rather large bill at the front desk, all the remaining cash in her wallet was gone. Only the balance in her bank card was barely enough to get by. As she walked out of the hotel, Li Boyan was just stepping into a stretch Lincoln. As the window rolled up, she caught a glimpse of Su Yan's delicate, pretty face. For a brief moment, she was dazed. Then she shook it off, reminding herself that it was all just something from the past. The summer breeze blew across her face, brushing away the bangs on her forehead. The drunkenness and drug effects had mostly worn off. She took out her phone and checked her account balance. 10, 100, 1,000. Everything she owned, cash, cards, any usable funds, added up to no more than a few tens of thousands. Not a huge amount, but not tiny either. Still, compared to the urgent 2 million she needed, it was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. She didn't dare return to the hospital now, afraid her parents would ask about the money again. But if she couldn't produce it, they would grow suspicious. Thinking it over, she realized she had nowhere to go. So she wandered aimlessly along the riverbank, the cool breeze brushing past her. Even in the summer, she didn't feel any relief, only wave after wave of chills. Buzz buzz. Her phone vibrated again with an incoming call. No matter how much she wanted to avoid it, she couldn't. She reluctantly pressed to answer. Hello, is this Miss Qingwan? A young man's polite voice asked in standard Mandarin from the other end of the line. Your parents' mortgaged house from earlier has reached its due date. If the loan isn't repaid by noon tomorrow, the court will repossess and auction it. Thank you for your cooperation. The voice on the other end was flat, as if merely carrying out a cold and indifferent procedure. Yet in that moment, her mind felt like it had been struck by lightning. She tried to suppress the tremor in her voice, forcing herself to remain calm, but she still couldn't stop shaking. Okay, I understand. Thank you for the reminder. The other party hung up. Her hands had gone numb, cold sweat was pouring down her back, and the phone kept slipping through her trembling grip. Now, not only was she buried in debt, but even the house she once called home was about to be taken away. And all of it was because of money. Bitter tears blurred her vision as she dazedly opened her contacts list. She had already asked everyone she could. The rest wouldn't help, even if she begged. There was only one person left. Lee Boyan. 20 million in debt, and her parents' daily medical expenses in the hospital flowing like running water. She was being crushed to the point she couldn't even breathe. She had no choice but to give up her dignity and choose survival. The promise she'd made not long ago, "I won't bother you again," had become a hollow lie. She could already imagine the mocking expression on Lee Boyan's face when he saw her. Even she looked down on herself now, but there was simply no other way. She let out a sigh. Lee Boyan's house wasn't far. In order to save a bit on taxi fare, she decided to walk there. Stopping and starting along the way, she arrived at the Lee residence an hour later. Large beads of sweat dripped from her forehead, soaking the back of her dress. She lifted a hand to wipe it away before pressing the doorbell. Looking up at the white-walled European-style villa, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. She had once thought she'd never return here again. The housekeeper came rushing over, looked through the peephole, and when she saw Qingwan, her expression instantly stiffened. "You and Sir are already divorced. He won't allow you in." Even the housekeeper dared to look down on her now. Since she was no longer part of this house, there was no need to be timid anymore. Qingwan put her hands on her hips and coldly interrupted. "We haven't signed the divorce papers yet. Legally, I'm still his wife. Let me in." The young housekeeper, lacking the education to argue back, could only fume silently as she opened the door. Qingwan changed into slippers and stepped once again into the strange yet familiar home. Lee Boyan hadn't returned yet, so she had no choice but to wait for him here. The Lee household was the same as a few days ago. The furniture, the layout, everything made her feel a strange sense of disorientation. Knowing this might be the last time she ever stepped foot in the Lee residence, she couldn't help wandering around, taking it all in. The housekeeper followed her closely, as if guarding against a thief. She had looked around almost everywhere, except her own room. But when she pushed the door open, it was nothing like what she had imagined. From the walls to the bedside tables, from the curtains to the photo frames, everything had been completely changed. There was nothing left of how it looked when she lived there. She opened her mouth in surprise and took a step back to check if she'd entered the wrong room. The housekeeper quickly interrupted her thoughts with a mocking tone, but Qingwan, who the girl had only seen act timid before, immediately silenced her with a glare. "Su Yan, you really move fast, huh?" She walked into the room and plopped down heavily on Su Yan's bed. Just a few days ago, she and Lee Boyan had shared their first night in this very bed. Now, thinking back, it felt like a lifetime ago. On the nightstand was a photo frame. She picked it up and examined it. It was a photo of Su Yan and Lee Boyan, with a nighttime cityscape reflected in the glass behind them. In the photo, Su Yan was holding on to Lee Boyan's arm, her fair face tinged with a blush. She leaned in with a smile to nibble on his earlobe. Lee Boyan also smiled and leaned in to kiss her back without hesitation. Time seemed frozen in that moment, captured by the photo, and her heart trembled uncontrollably. After so many years, it was the first time she'd ever seen such a bright smile on Lee Boyan's face. Unfortunately, it wasn't for her. But it was only in front of Su Yan that he could smile, could display the emotions of a normal person. She tossed the photo aside, trying hard to rein in her emotions and avoid bringing more trouble upon herself. When she was still living there, the room had been decorated entirely in Lee Boyan's favorite dark coffee tones, every item chosen to suit his taste. But now, everything had changed. "Where are all my things in the room? Where did they go?" she asked irritably, gesturing casually around the room. The young maid quickly looked up, finally finding something she could respond to. "Right after you left, Miss Su ordered everything to be thrown out, one by one. Then she replaced it all with these cute little things. The full set of luxury skincare products on the vanity, the seasonal couture pieces in the wardrobe and shoe cabinets. None of it had ever belonged to her before." Looking around at all the pink throughout the room, she suddenly felt a pang for the 3 years she'd spent here. She let out a long sigh and pulled her thoughts back to the present, reminding herself again of why she had come. She still had her parents to care for, debts that weren't paid off. She didn't have the luxury to wallow in sorrow and dwell on the past. She came to Li Boyan today for one reason only, to borrow money. Once she got what she needed, no matter who he was with, it would have nothing to do with her ever again. At that thought, she immediately let go of her irritation and slowly returned to sit on the living room sofa. Boyan, no, I want that bag. Suyan's coquettish voice rang out from outside the door. She wrapped her arms around Li Boyan's neck, trying to get closer, but her height wasn't enough. She pouted in frustration, if you don't buy it for me, I'll be mad and ignore you. Li Boyan gave in, scooping her up in his arms and spinning her around with a laugh. Alright, whatever Yan Yan wants, I'll buy it. I'll say yes to whatever you say. In a place where no one could see, her fingers dug tightly into her own flesh, and her eyes lost focus. It wasn't until the pain in her hand brought her back to reality that she noticed the maid going to open the door. She had once promised never to disturb him again, but this time, she had broken that promise. Qingwan? What are you doing here? Su Yan was the first to spot her, still hanging on Li Boyan's body as she cried out in surprise. Li Boyan narrowed his eyes and turned his head in Su Yan's direction. Her small frame was curled up on the sofa. With just one glance, a cold glint flashed in his deep eyes. He gently put Su Yan down and swept his eyes over Qingwan, sneering, what? Ran out of money again? Back to whoring? Just one sentence was enough to completely shatter her emotional defenses. Su Yan feigned surprise and raised her hand in disgust. Qingwan, I didn't expect you to actually. She treated their ridicule as nothing more than background noise, walked up to Li Boyan, and looked him straight in the eyes. The 20 million had originally belonged to her. Asking for it back now wasn't too much. Li Boyan, I came here today too. Qingwan, remember what you said this morning? Li Boyan coldly interrupted her, his gaze turning sharp and chilling as it swept over her. She had said she would never disturb him and Su Yan again. So now, she needed to disappear completely. She looked up and saw Li Boyan wrapping his arm around Su Yan's waist as the two of them flirted and played around. Fine, then. She didn't want him anymore. She would never disturb him again. But Li Boyan seemed to have forgotten one very important thing. Su Yan, did you get a marriage certificate? She pulled out her and Li Boyan's marriage certificate from her bag and opened it for display. She hadn't divorced Li Boyan yet, so of course Su Yan, who was already on her second marriage, didn't have a certificate. She had undoubtedly hit a sore spot in Su Yan's heart. Boyan, I want one too. Su Yan immediately grabbed his hand, twisting her waist coquettishly. This was a silent war between women, and Su Yan was unwilling to lose. Li Boyan, soft-hearted, nodded slightly. But when he turned to face her, his expression suddenly turned cold and harsh. Fine. You want a divorce certificate? Name your conditions, I'll give you whatever you want. Exactly, Qingwan, anything you want we'll give it to you. Su Yan deliberately tried to provoke her. Glancing at Su Yan's ugly expression, she clenched her heart. No need. I already have money. Just divorce me. She stared at Li Boyan, her tone firm. Li Boyan froze, clearly surprised. He had overlooked such a huge loophole and this woman didn't even try to exploit it. Fine. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau now and end this. Li Boyan turned around, grabbing Su Yan and heading out, with her quickly following behind. The parking lot wasn't far, but Su Yan clung tightly to Li Boyan, pouting with dissatisfaction. Boyan, really, how could you not take care of something like this earlier? What do you mean by this, Li Boyan coaxed her gently, Yan, it's my fault. I promise it won't happen again. And besides, why are you even competing with a woman like her? Anything you want, I'll give it to you. Her heart ached. What kind of woman was she? In his eyes, was she just some whore? While the two flirted, she stood behind them, watching coldly. After soothing Su Yan's mood, Li Boyan went to get the car. Soon, his car stopped in front of her, forcing her to take 2 steps back. Get in. Li Boyan didn't spare her even a glance. She opened the back door, but Su Yan had already rushed to occupy the seat and even placed her oversized bucket-style handbag on the other spot. It was obvious she didn't want her to sit. Fine, she didn't need to. She had legs, didn't she? She slammed the car door shut with force, producing a deafening bang. Qingwan, what are you doing? Su Yan rolled down the window and leaned out with an annoyed expression. She struck a running pose and began swinging her arms. Sorry, your presence in the air is a bit nauseating, she said, shrugging and glancing at Su Yan with disdain. So I'll get there on my own. Sit or don't, nobody's forcing you. Su Yan huffed and sank back into the seat, crossing her arms in anger. Li Boyan raised an eyebrow at the exchange. What a self-inflicted punishment. But somehow, the annoyance he used to feel toward her wasn't so strong anymore, and the haze of frustration hanging over his heart seemed to lift a little. Half an hour later, drenched in sweat under the scorching sun and with her dress soaked, she finally reached the Civil Affairs Bureau. Su Yan held the household registration book, clinging impatiently to Li Boyan's arm. Hurry up, hurry up. Don't delay our marriage, Su Yan urged anxiously, barely able to contain her excitement. The heels of her feet throbbed with pain, but she ignored it and walked around them into the building. At this hour, with closing time near, the Civil Affairs office was nearly empty. She and Li Boyan headed straight to the divorce counter. Marriage certificate and household registration book, the registrar said with a blank expression. She flipped to the photo page in the household book. Li Boyan looked as cold and indifferent as always. They both took out their identification and handed it over. The notary gave them a cursory glance, then asked in a routine tone, "You've been married for 3 years. Are you sure you want to end the marriage?" What a redundant question. They'd already made it this far. What use would persuasion be now? Yes. Yes. Their answers came without a trace of doubt. The notary stamped the documents with a steel seal and handed the 2 dark green divorce certificates back to them. She took her certificate and felt its weight so heavy. 3 years ago, when she received that bright red marriage certificate, she thought it was the start of a happy life. She never expected it would be the beginning of a nightmare. 3 years later, with this dark green divorce certificate in her hand, she could finally escape the bottomless abyss that was the Li family. She let out a cold, mocking laugh as if shaking off a burden, then shoved the certificate to the very bottom of her canvas bag. Li Boyan, this time, it's truly goodbye forever. She stole a glance at the sharply dressed man beside her. That handsome face, that was what had once drawn her in. But now it was finally over. She could let go. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Li Boyan followed suit. The short distance between them passed in complete silence. As soon as they stepped outside, Su Yan ran up and threw herself into Li Boyan's arms, asking eagerly, Well? Is it done? Li Boyan chuckled lightly, nodded, and pulled out the little booklet. Here, isn't this what you wanted? Su Yan was overjoyed and quickly flipped it open to check. Li Boyan. Qingwan. Divorced. Boyan, I love you to death. Su Yan clung to him and quickly pulled him toward the marriage registration window. While he wasn't paying attention, she tilted her head up and shot her a smug glance. Seeing that the two of them were dressed expensively, the notary beamed. Getting married, are you? Please hand me your household registration book. She didn't want to hear any more. Turning, she walked away. It was all over. She didn't want the 20 million anymore. From this moment on, Li Boyan would have nothing to do with her. No more unjust hatred or insults from her mother-in-law, no more being looked down on and belittled, no more begging and scraping to survive. As long as she worked hard at life and her job, the debts would be paid off eventually. The warm sunlight fell on her face, but it no longer felt harsh or unbearable. She clutched the hem of her clothes and let a faint smile tug at her lips. Maybe. This wasn't such a bad thing after all. Running away was never the solution. Sooner or later, you have to face things. With that thought, she gritted her teeth, hailed a cab, and returned to the hospital. As she looked at the bustling crowd, a sense of isolation and emptiness washed over her. After a moment of daze, she pulled herself together and pushed the door open. The doctor had already called her earlier, saying that her father's condition had improved significantly compared to the past few days. He advised her to take good care of them and avoid emotional upheaval. So she forced the biggest smile she could muster and acted as if nothing had happened, as if she were in a good mood. Mom, Dad, I'm back. You unfilial daughter, you still dare come back. Her father's angry roar echoed behind her. Her hand froze on the door lock, and a chill ran down her spine. All sorts of terrible thoughts rushed into her head. Could the divorce have been exposed? Impossible. She'd just completed the process. There was no way anyone could have known so soon. She forced herself to stay calm, turned around with a confused smile, and walked toward her father. Dad, you're finally awake. Why are you so angry? Who upset you? Her slender fingers trembled uncontrollably. If word really had gotten out, the consequences were unimaginable. Her father turned away from her in anger, clutching his chest in pain, his voice trembling with fury. Get out. I have no daughter like you. He looked absolutely furious, unwilling to even spare her another glance. After multiple attempts to find out the truth failed, she could only kneel and crawl toward her mother, who was lying on the hospital bed. Mom, please tell me what happened. Don't scare me like this. She was already completely exhausted. Any more of this, and it would be the final straw. As she spoke, she saw tears brimming in her mother's eyes. Used tissues were piled into a small mountain on the bedside table. Her mother shoved her away, causing her to fall to the floor. Then she grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her violently. Qingwan, what the hell did you do? You might as well let us die instead. Her head spun from the shaking, and she helplessly tried to stop her. Mom, just tell me straight, please. Stop scaring me. At that moment, her father couldn't bear to watch anymore and spoke up. Show her. Let her see what a good job she's done. Sobbing quietly, her mother fumbled around on the floor and found the TV remote, then turned on the entertainment channel. She rewound the program, and suddenly the noisy chatter cut off. The screen froze on a moment in time. A massive entertainment headline flashed across the screen, grabbing everyone's attention. The bold letters read, President of Lee Corporation's wife behaves indecently extramarital promiscuity, spends the night with a male escort. The bold, heavy black font hit like a punch in the gut. Her hand froze in midair. No, Dad, it's not true, she cried, crawling to her father's bedside and clutching at his shirt. Someone paid to set me up. You have to believe me. But moments later, even more damning evidence appeared. Nude photos. Photos of her lying in bed with a naked man were plastered across the screen. The source was Su Yan's personal account. Once posted, the images went viral, with over 100,000 shares in no time. Every media outlet was scrambling to report on it. The scandal was as hot as any A-list celebrity gossip. Soon, the entire country knew. The entertainment segment soon moved to the next story. But she felt as if all the strength had been drained from her body. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor. She felt like she had fallen into an ice cave. But even that chill couldn't compare to the shattering pain in her heart. You still dare say it's fake? You shameless girl, her father roared, his scolding ringing in her ears, but she couldn't hear him anymore. It was as if she were already dead, paralyzed on the floor, eyes staring blankly at the white ceiling above. She had thought that divorcing him would let her completely escape the past. But she had been so wrong. Perhaps with a wave of Li Boyan's hand, he could have let her go, but not Su Yan. She went through so much trouble just to drug her, just to stage the illusion of infidelity. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted to utterly ruin her. Destroy her reputation. Leave her in eternal disgrace. Would Su Yan only be satisfied and at peace once she had taken everything from her? So this so-called escape had only ever been wishful thinking. In reality, she was trapped in an inescapable nightmare. She let out a helpless laugh, mocking her own stupidity and naivety. Hot tears streamed uncontrollably from her almond-shaped eyes, and a bitter taste spread in her mouth. It was just too bitter. Enough, old man, stop yelling at her. Her mother rushed to her father's side, tugging at his arm, eyes red as she tried to calm him down. She had nothing left in Lee, her parents. She couldn't let that person get what they wanted. Forcing herself to snap out of it, her gaze finally focused as she clutched the railing of the hospital bed and staggered to her feet. She raised her hand and wiped away the tears streaming down her face, but her makeup was already completely ruined. Trembling, she shuffled over to her father, then suddenly dropped to her knees. Her knees hit the tiled floor with a dull, heavy thud. Dad, I was wrong, but it's really not what you think. Qingwan, I'm just going to ask you this once, did you sleep with that man? Her father pointed at his own head with a trembling hand, his voice hoarse and broken, bloodshot eyes staring intensely. Yes or no? The weight of that unforgiving question crashed into her ears, and the answer felt like 1,000 pounds. Yes. The cruel word squeezed out between her clenched teeth. Her father shook his head in disbelief, eyes rolling back as he collapsed from shock. His hands twitched, and his body stiffened, frozen in place. Old man. Father. She cried out and rushed forward to support him, patting his back to help him breathe. Half a minute later, he finally gasped for air, but the moment he saw her by his side, his face turned cold. As my daughter, you carried on with another man while still married. You've disgraced the family and have no right to be here, he roared, shoving her away, the force causing even himself to stumble backward. Dad, it wasn't like that, she clutched at the hem of his shirt, trying to explain. Bang! Her father grabbed a block of wood nearby and slammed it toward her head, silencing her instantly. Qingwan, please, don't say anything more. He's too angry right now. Just go home first, her mother pleaded as she pulled her husband's arm back, turning to her with sorrowful eyes. Seeing her still unwilling to leave, her father raised his hand again to strike, so she quickly stood up and backed toward the door. It's really not what you think. Once you both calm down, I'll explain everything. Waving her hand, she stepped out of the room and gently closed the door behind her. Her weak body slid slowly down the doorframe until she collapsed on the floor. People passed by, glancing curiously at her, but she no longer had the strength to stand up again. Through the glass window, she could still hear her father's furious yelling and her mother's anxious cries. Her tears streamed down uncontrollably. Her father had been a businessman for many years and was known for his upright character. He couldn't tolerate even a grain of sand in his eye. But at that time, she had been drugged. She didn't even know the full truth herself. How could she possibly explain it to her parents? She closed her eyes in bitter despair. Sweat clung to every inch of her body, her clothes sticking uncomfortably to her skin, making her feel even worse. In the end, she could only grip the doorknob and pull herself back up, dragging her exhausted body away. She was utterly drained. Everything weighed so heavily on her that she could barely breathe. She could only try to console herself. Stepping out of the hospital, the strong smell of antiseptic gradually faded. A cool night breeze brushed her skin. The sweat dried in the wind, leaving an odd sense of relief. The city was glowing under the night sky, the lights brilliant and alive, but all that beauty had nothing to do with her. All she had left was embarrassment and unspeakable shame. Her chest ached as if twisted by invisible hands. Clutching it, she walked to the riverside bridge. In this city that never slept, even in the middle of the night, the traffic flowed endlessly and the crowds bustled. She turned around and looked at the rippling surface of the river, and gradually, the pain in her heart began to ease. She closed her eyes and instinctively leaned forward, savoring this brief moment of tranquility that belonged only to her. Only the gentle river breeze lingered in her ears. Miss, don't do anything foolish. Life is still long. Suddenly, a loud shout came from behind her. She turned around in confusion to see who it was. But before she could react, a strong arm wrapped tightly around her waist and yanked her down from the railing. Thud. The man holding her was clearly inexperienced. He lost his grip, and the back of her head hit the ground hard. Ow, that hurts. She rubbed the back of her head in pain, propping herself up with her elbows to sit upright. She shouted angrily, "Who pulled me down?" Unexpectedly, what was meant to be a good deed went awry. Feeling awkward, Song Zixing scratched his head and said apologetically, "Sorry, miss, I thought you were trying to jump into the lake this late at night. I panicked and pulled you down. I didn't expect." "You didn't expect to end up slamming me instead?" She cut him off, raising an eyebrow in challenge. Song Zixing nodded helplessly and reached out a hand, gently pulling her up. "You're the one thinking about jumping. I've still got a lot of life left to live. Why would I want to die?" She flung his hand away. She didn't have a single shred of goodwill toward a man who had randomly knocked her over. Song Zixing adjusted his glasses and mumbled under his breath, "She's really not suicidal." "Of course not," she spat back at him, turning to leave this place of trouble. "Wait, miss, don't go." Song Zixing jogged to catch up and nagged beside her like a monk chanting scripture. "I misunderstood the situation. It's my fault. Since that's the case, I have to make it up to you." He stepped in front of her. Feeling annoyed by his pestering, she stopped in her tracks, crossed her arms, and said, "You're so annoying. Alright, tell me how exactly are you going to make it up to me? Song Zisheng lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then he suddenly grinned and pulled her forward. Come on, I'll take you to a bar for drinks. My treat. She was about to shake off his hand and decline, but then remembered she couldn't go back to the hospital tonight, and her own apartment had been taken away. With nowhere else to go, she figured she might as well enjoy some free drinks. Along the way, she remained silent, while Song Zisheng chattered nonstop, introducing himself. Though his voice grated on her ears and made her want to plug them, she did learn a few things. His name was Song Zisheng, he seemed to come from a well-off family, and he was a returnee who had studied abroad. Between the chatter and the walk, they arrived at the bar entrance. Thinking about her last disastrous drinking experience, she hesitated for a moment before stepping in. Though it was a bar, the place Song Zisheng had chosen had a very mellow atmosphere. Everyone minded their own business, and a graceful symphony played in the background. The alluring ambience lacked the garish lights and noisy crowd, yet made one even more tempted to drown in a drink. Song Zisheng was clearly a regular. He casually ordered 2 drinks with names she didn't recognize. When the waiter turned to ask her what she wanted, she drifted into a daze. In the 3 years she'd been married into the Lee family, she'd barely set foot outside, let alone visited a bar. It was something she couldn't have even imagined. With a self-deprecating chuckle, she calmly said, I'll have the same as him. Qingwan, nice taste. Song Zisheng joked amiably. She remained distant inside but returned a polite smile. The 2 clinked glasses. As she took a sip, she realized it was hard liquor and instinctively swallowed hard. After downing the glass, her stomach burned with intense pain. But the allure of strong liquor was too much. She couldn't resist and ordered 1 glass after another. She sipped and gagged, drowsiness crashing over her like a tidal wave. Unable to hold on, she leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, and dozed off for a bit. It wasn't until the second half of the night that she slowly came to. But by then, Song Zisheng beside her was also dead drunk, just like her, completely wasted. She nudged him with her elbow, urging him, Song Zisheng, hurry up and pay. Pay the bill. She shouted several times before he was finally jolted awake. Song Zisheng looked like he'd just woken from a dream, suddenly realizing what was going on. He nodded and reached into his pants pocket. Not here. Not here either. The drunken haze cleared from Song Zisheng's eyes in an instant. He sat up straight in shock and searched himself thoroughly. The result was the same nothing. Don't tell me you didn't bring any money, she cried out in disbelief, pointing at him. She was already having a terrible day. This was the last thing she needed. Song Zisheng hesitated for a long time before nodding with a look of disbelief. Yeah, so, maybe could you cover for me? She almost spat out a mouthful of blood. If it weren't for trying to take advantage of a freebie today, she wouldn't have come at all. At this hour, everyone else had already left, only the 2 of them remained. Once they left, the bar could finally close. The bartender stared at her intently, making her feel extremely uneasy. Fine. I'll pay, she said, waving a hand and pulling out her bank card, reluctantly handing it over. Soon, the card and a 4-digit bill were handed back to her. 4 digits. That was quite a bit for someone in her current situation. Feeling a bit of heartache, she stuffed the card back in her wallet and turned to leave. While she was paying, Song Zisheng had dozed off again, slumped over the table. She looked at him and sighed helplessly. She hesitated for a moment but ultimately gave up the idea of dragging this drunkard home. She could barely take care of herself. Song Zisheng was on his own. Tucking her card away, she quietly left with her bag. There was no way she was making it back to the hospital tonight, and she couldn't bear to spend money on a hotel. Luckily, there was a small train station nearby with plenty of empty seats. After a moment of hesitation, she decided to spend the night there. When she woke up, her whole body felt like it had been trampled. Her limbs were sore and weak. She forced herself to get up. Seeing it was already late, she took a bus back home. She was supposed to complete the final procedure for taking possession of the house, but when she got there, it was packed with people. Their expressions were anything but friendly, and a sense of dread settled over her heart. Wan Qingwan, one of them called out, directly confronting her. There was no way to avoid it now, so she decided to face it head-on. I am, she replied, calm and unflinching. These are your parents' IOUs. One by one, the people pulled out notes from their pockets and tossed them at her. She picked them up and examined them carefully. Sure enough, they were written in her parents' handwriting. Altogether, the debt added up to several million. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. Taking a deep breath to steel herself, she looked up and asked, "What's the latest I can repay it?" "Now." The worst possible answer. From the look on their faces, they clearly weren't leaving without the money today. Gritting her teeth, she pulled out the last bank card she had with any remaining balance. "This is all the money I have left. It's only a few tens of thousands," she said, clutching the still warm card with trembling fingers as she handed it over. "But I promise you I'll pay the rest back very soon." Unable to get anything from her, those people muttered a few curses under their breath, then snatched the card away and left. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, one of them turned back to threaten her, "If you can't come up with the money next time, your parents are going to be in trouble." She let out a self-deprecating chuckle and slammed her hand hard against the wall only to be left with nothing but searing pain. After finishing the handover process with the court and signing the paperwork, the matter was no longer her concern. And with that, she bid a permanent farewell to the house. Once the wave of sentimentality passed, she turned back to face her harsh reality. She opened her wallet. Now that the card was gone, only some scattered cash remained. She counted it barely 100 in total. Seeing how little money she had left, she gritted her teeth and made up her mind to go out and find a job to support herself. She looked up several companies online and hastily put together a resume to send out for interviews. "Sorry, our company isn't hiring at the moment." "Apologies, you don't meet our requirements." After being a housewife in the Lee family for 3 years, she had already become out of touch with society. As expected, she was rejected time and again. By the time she got to the last company, she was already disheartened. And once again she was turned down. But luckily, the interviewer at this company happened to be an old classmate she had a good relationship with, and after the interview, they decided to keep her on. "Wan Qingwan, I also have a side job that pays quite well. Want to give it a try?" The old classmate waggled their eyebrows and gave her body a once-over. This was undoubtedly her last shred of hope. She nodded quickly and asked, "What kind of job? What's the pay like?" Just when she had been in despair, the flame of hope was reignited. "Freelance modeling, really easy." "The pay? You'll be making this much per day." The classmate held up 4 fingers. "Over 1,000 a day." At a time like this when she was so short on money, she wasn't about to turn it down. Without even asking what kind of shoot it was, she immediately agreed. "With your figure, this type of shoot will be perfect. You'll definitely owe me a big thank you afterward." The classmate gave her a meaningful smile, then handed her a business card. That afternoon, she found the place and handed over the card. Someone escorted her inside to begin onboarding. Everything went smoothly. This was the most trouble-free thing she'd experienced in days, which actually made her feel a bit uneasy. After getting hired, she agreed right away to shoot that very day for the sake of the paycheck. The staff handed her a pile of clothing, and when she took it to the changing room, she froze. Leopard print lingerie, a cat ear headband. Everything pointed clearly to something of a sexual nature. But at this point, this was her last option. She had no other choice. Clenching her teeth, she hardened her resolve and changed into the outfit. The shoot itself went more smoothly than she had imagined. The photographer was kind and encouraging. She was also surprisingly good at posing, and the shoot was already halfway done. "Qingwan, one of the partners will be dropping by soon. Be sure to make a good impression," the assistant whispered kindly, leaning in. "This could affect your pay." She nodded in understanding. After a while, there was some noise outside the door, and then it was pushed open. "Hello, partner." "Hello, President Lee." The nearby staff immediately bowed in greeting. Naturally, she didn't dare slack off. She posed seductively for the camera, hoping to leave a good impression on the partner and maybe earn a raise. Just as she blinked and struck a cute beckoning cat pose, a familiar voice rang in her ear. "Qingwan." The icy voice echoed above her head, the voice she had heard for 3 years, more familiar than anything. She turned her head and just as she expected, there he was. Lee Boyan. Lee Boyan stood at a distance, coldly staring at her, giving her a long, scrutinizing look. She couldn't help but stop what she was doing, flustered, and quickly backed up against the wall. Naturally, Lee Boyan didn't let up. He stepped to her side and said coldly, "What now? Outselling your body for money again?" He wasn't wrong. She was outselling herself. The scorn in his voice was cutting. Her face turned crimson, and for a moment, she couldn't even come up with a single word to defend herself. God really did have a way of toying with her, giving her hope one moment, then dragging her into the depths of despair the next. "I'm here for a legitimate shoot," she finally said firmly, refusing to back down. "Oh, very legitimate, I'm sure." Lee Boyan's eyes were cold as he nodded slightly, his words full of sarcasm. That intentional mockery, thinly veiled, stung all the more coming from him. Someone nearby, sensing the awkward tension, quickly tried to smooth things over. "Wow, we didn't know Qingwan and President Lee knew each other. That'll definitely make future collaborations smoother." "No need. Replace the model," Lee Boyan cut in coldly, his gaze sharp as ice. "Even if we're a women's brand, we don't need a whore modeling for us." "Whore." His words chilled the air around him, making everyone too scared to speak. The others exchanged confused glances, unsure of what exactly he meant. "Check the news and you'll understand," Lee Boyan snapped as he threw the file at his assistant and walked away, his expression full of displeasure. "Make sure she's replaced." He said it twice. No one dared go against it. A production assistant quickly approached her to apologize. "Miss Qingwan, I'm so sorry, but our partner..." Before the assistant could finish, her tears were already streaming down her face. This job had been her last hope. She'd even been willing to sell her dignity for it. So why would he have to show up and strip away everything from her again? With her hair disheveled and eyes brimming with tears, she changed back into her own clothes in the dressing room. Staring into the mirror, she looked almost lifeless, her face drained of all color. She gently touched her cheek in sorrow. Her once smooth skin was now lined with fatigue, fine wrinkles creeping in, and dark circles dimming the brightness of her eyes. It had only been 5 days. In just 5 days, the vibrant, youthful woman she once was had aged several years. Misery swelled in her chest. She wanted to cry, but her eyes were too dry for tears. Stepping outside, she handed her undergarments to the assistant. People nearby glanced over, their eyes filled with curiosity. They didn't know yet. But once they saw the news, that curiosity would surely turn into disgust. Shivering, she pulled on a jacket and slipped quietly out of the building. As she stepped outside, she could already imagine how the people inside would start gossiping about her. An adulteress? A nightclub whore? But she no longer had the strength to care about those unrestrained accusations. She had more pressing concerns. She'd lost her high-paying job, which meant her dream of escaping debt was now further away than ever. She had hoped to use the paycheck to buy her parents some fruit as a treat. Now, it looked like even affording her next meal would be a challenge. Her hair loose and eyes empty, she wandered down the sidewalk aimlessly. Around her, car horns blared and pedestrians shouted, all of it only making her feel more isolated. From yesterday morning until now, she hadn't had a drop of water, no food either. Even a body of steel wouldn't be able to endure much longer. The glaring sunlight hit her face, her lips turning pale uncontrollably, and even her steps began to tremble. Raising a hand to shield her forehead, she squinted, eyes half closed, and dazedly wandered into the middle of the road. By the time she realized it, it was already too late. She was right in the middle of the city's main traffic hub, with vehicles constantly zipping past her on both sides. And she was completely stuck. After being baked under the scorching sun for a long time, a sudden gap appeared in the traffic to her side. She immediately seized the opportunity and broke into a run, trying to dash across. Beep. 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 The blaring horn of a motorcycle rang in her ears. Startled, she turned her heedfully to see the bike barely a step away from her. She froze on the spot, not knowing how to react. The man on the motorcycle slammed on the brakes. Just as the bike was about to graze her arm, he swerved sharply, narrowly missing her. However, the gust of wind from the sudden turn knocked her off balance, and she fell backward without any warning. Traffic came to a standstill instantly, with vehicles unable to move past the scene. The rider quickly took off his helmet and rushed to her side. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked cautiously as he gently lifted her arm. Seeing she wasn't seriously hurt, he helped her up. When she heard the familiar, magnetic male voice, she froze for a second and turned around immediately. Sure enough, it was Song Zixing. Enemies really do cross paths. The last time she saw Song Zixing, she had fallen and hit the back of her head and lost money. And this time? Of course, nothing good happened either. She quickly got up, just about to point at his nose and let out her frustration. Before she could say a word, Song Zixing gestured behind him. She looked over in confusion. Because it was rush hour, their commotion had caused traffic to back up. Onlookers had gathered in tight circles around them, layer upon layer, severely disrupting the flow of vehicles. Qingwan, whatever it is, let's get on the bike first. We can talk later, alright? Song Zixing took her hand and led her to the motorcycle. She had no choice but to go along. She swung a leg over the seat, and Song Zixing immediately started the engine. Seeing there was no more drama, the crowd dispersed. The traffic slowly began to clear up and soon returned to normal. Only then did she slowly speak, giving Song Zixing a light smack on the back of the head. Song Zixing, what kind of curse are you? Why do I always have such bad luck whenever I see you? Song Zixing shook his head helplessly. It's not on purpose. I just have a knack for turning good intentions into bad outcomes. She had no way to deal with him like this and could only swallow her frustration. Qingwan, to make it up to you, let me take you for a ride, Song Zixing said, tightening his grip on the handlebars and turning his head to ask for her opinion. Things had been too stifling lately, and having someone to help her unwind didn't sound so bad, so she nodded in agreement. Hearing that, Song Zixing's lips curled into a confident smile. Hold on tight. Before the words even finished, the motorcycle suddenly accelerated, speeding around the edge of the overpass. Her heart skipped a beat in fright, and she quickly grabbed the rear handle. Song Zixing, are you trying to die? Slow down. Scolded, Song Zixing immediately stopped messing around. He tightened the brake and gradually reduced the speed. Soon, the bike was moving at a more reasonable pace. She nodded in satisfaction and closed her eyes, enjoying the gentle breeze brushing past her face. With no particular destination, Song Zixing instinctively headed toward the racetrack of the racing club he had joined. Outside of work, racing was one of Song Zixing's few hobbies, and through it, he had made a fair share of rowdy friends. She noticed the growing noise around her and opened her eyes in confusion. The club covered a large area and usually had people hanging around during the day to play with cars. Since today was a holiday, it was even livelier than usual. Why did you bring me here? She grabbed the corner of Song Zixing's shirt and blurted out. Song Zixing slowly accelerated to catch up with a few of his friends and explained matter-of-factly, just taking a drive, thought I'd drop by to see some friends. She rolled her eyes internally in exasperation. What did his friends have to do with her? But since she was already here, she had no choice but to wait until Song Zixing was done chatting. A few of his friends turned around, and their eyes all landed on her in the back seat. They gave her meaningful, knowing smiles. Song Zixing joined them and greeted each one. Zixing, didn't expect you to have grown up in just a few days, the leader of the group teased first. Song Zixing was completely lost and quickly asked, what do you mean, grown up? Didn't think you'd finally come to your senses and start doing more than just messing with cars, the others chimed in immediately, all throwing glances in her direction. Even an idiot could figure out what they meant, and Song Zixing instantly realized it too. No, it's not like that. Qingwan is just a friend, he waved his hands, trying to explain. But the more he explained, the more suspicious it seemed. They all just assumed he was too shy to admit it. Being scrutinized under their burning gazes made her extremely uncomfortable, but she couldn't very well speak up and clarify things herself. After a while, she couldn't bear it anymore and tugged at Song Zixing, urging him to leave. Embarrassed, Song Zixing quickly said his goodbyes and drove away. Once they were far enough from the scene, both of them let out a long sigh of relief. Song Zixing, if I ever believe your nonsense again, I won't be your one anymore, she fumed, her head throbbing with anger, and felt the urge to kick him out of the car. But Song Zixing had no other choice but to accept her frustration silently, not daring to talk back. After a long sigh, she decided not to dwell on such a minor incident. She briefly gave him her destination, and Song Zixing, playing the good guy to the end, dropped her off at the hospital entrance before waving goodbye. After parting ways with Song Zixing, she smoothed down her messy hair and tidied herself up before daring to go inside. After the scandal with the nude photos last time, her parents' conditions had worsened. Her mother's condition was still relatively stable, but her father's was much more serious. His heart had always been weak, and the emotional trauma had pushed him over the edge. He had to undergo an emergency coronary bypass surgery. Thankfully, the surgery was a success. After a few days of observation in the ICU, he was moved to a regular room. She borrowed a few thousand yuan from friends for emergencies and had been taking care of her parents in the hospital these past few days. After many sleepless nights of meticulous care, her parents' health gradually began to improve. Her father was already able to get out of bed and walk, and when they had free time, her mother would help him out to the hospital's back garden to sit and relax. To make ends meet, she had also been casting a wide net with her resume submissions online. Most had disappeared into the void, but a few had gotten back to her. Today, the company she visited, Song Corporation, offered her a job after 3 rounds of interviews, along with a very attractive salary package. Seeing that her parents were recovering and now capable of looking after themselves, she decided it was time to go back to work and make a living. Following the address on the card, she arrived at the company building, an imposing structure of glass and steel that could rival the Li Corporation in scale, causing her to gasp inwardly. When the department manager glanced at her resume and offer letter, he was visibly surprised. It turned out she was personally requested by President Song. How could anyone dare to treat her lightly? The manager immediately stood up respectfully and, with a smile, led her to complete the onboarding procedures. She felt both surprised and flattered. Though puzzled, she gladly accepted the opportunity. Everything went smoothly. She was assigned a position as a personal assistant to President Song. Sitting at her new desk, she was full of anticipation to meet her direct superior. But when President Song casually strolled past her, she froze in shock. That familiar silhouette flashed before her eyes. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, unable to believe her own suspicion. Only when President Song turned around did she realize she hadn't been mistaken. This so-called President Song was Song Zixing. She stood rooted to the spot, covering her mouth in astonishment as she stared at Song Zixing. Dressed in a tailored suit and polished leather shoes, Song Zixing looked completely different from the man who once took her on a motorbike ride. Unbelievable as it was, based on what Song Zixing had previously confessed, everything now lined up. She suppressed a laugh and forced herself to accept the truth. "Hello, President Song," she greeted him, bowing respectfully as she'd learned during training. Song Zixing's eyes flickered, then he let out a laugh and walked up to her. "All right. When I was reviewing assistant candidates, I came across your file by chance. Even though I pulled strings to get you in, you still have to go through everything just like the others." She nodded. Right now, she desperately needed the money. Pretending to decline would be pointless, so she might as well work hard and prove herself. After a full day of studying notes left by the previous assistant, she managed to memorize most of the essentials. Once Song Zixing had wrapped up his work, she thought she could get off early and go home to care for her parents. But to her surprise, he stopped her. "There's a business dinner tonight. I'd like you to come with me," he said, picking up a nearby suit jacket and pulling her along. "A dinner?" She wanted to decline at first, but thinking it was only her first day on the job, she couldn't just walk away. So she agreed. Song Zixing had her change into a sweet-looking dress. Once seated at the event, she helped pour drinks and exchanged pleasantries with various industry bigshots on his behalf. Having a beautiful woman at the table livened the mood considerably. "Apologies for being late, everyone. I'll punish myself with 3 drinks. A cool and familiar voice exploded in her ear. It was a voice she knew all too well. The infamous CEO of Li Corporation, Li Boyan, very devil who had once pushed her into the abyss. Li Boyan took the empty seat directly across from her and began chatting closely with the business partners beside him. Too close. Her pupils shrank. Instinctively, she lowered her head, allowing her dark hair to shield most of her face, giving her a tiny bit of security. "Song Zixing, there's an emergency at home. I need to leave," she turned and whispered, flustered and avoiding eye contact. Song Zixing raised an eyebrow, noticing her flushed, anxious face. He immediately understood. "All right. Be safe." She quickly stood up, shielding her face and deliberately avoiding Li Boyan's side of the table. "Qingwan, you forgot your phone." Just as she was about to leave, Song Zixing raised her phone and shouted loudly. His voice was loud and clear. Everyone at the table heard it, including Li Boyan. Her fragile nerves snapped instantly. Her back stiffened, and after a brief pause, she lowered her head in resignation and walked back. Can only leave it to fate. Just as she passed by Li Boyan, he turned his head away in disdain and said nothing. She let out a slight sigh of relief. But she had underestimated him. As she tried to leave again, a strong hand grabbed her arm tightly. She struggled and lifted her leg, but the force pushed her backward. "Wan Qingwan?" A cold, sharp voice rang out above her head. Her legs trembled uncontrollably. She could already guess what mocking words would follow. But Song Zixing had given her a second chance at life. She didn't want to disgrace him. "President Li, you're a married man. Please show some self-respect." She tried to shake off his hand, but his grip only tightened more forcefully. As soon as the words left her mouth, she instantly regretted them. She too had once been a married woman, only to be framed and left with a tarnished reputation. Sure enough, Li Boyan let out a cold snort, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Self-respect? Miss Qingwan, you really are a pure little lotus, aren't you?" In an instant, she lowered her head in silence, pretending not to hear, only hoping that Li Boyan would let her go. Li Boyan reached out, forcing her chin up, making her meet his dark, piercing eyes, glinting coldly. Everyone around fell silent, not daring to speak. The dinner atmosphere grew eerily tense. Song Zixing quickly stood up and pulled Li Boyan away, stepping protectively in front of her. "President Li, let's talk calmly. Qingwan has some family matters to attend to today, so she won't be staying to catch up." With that, he gently pushed her toward the exit. Li Boyan glanced at him but said nothing more. The moment the private room door closed, hushed whispers began to rise, with gossipers eagerly digging for information about her. Li Boyan frowned, his tone laced with irritation. "Just a low-class nobody. No need to bother about her. Let's continue." Hearing that, Song Zixing clenched his fists, veins bulging slightly. But before he could make a move, she grabbed his hand. "Thank you, but I don't want to cause more trouble." She turned away quietly, her figure thin and desolate. Song Zixing watched her, his face filled with silent pain. But soon, everyone's attention was captured by another piece of breaking news. Li Corporation CEO spotted with new love interest, rumored wedding date approaching. Gossip like this flashed across her eyes for several weeks. As expected, it didn't take long for Li Boyan and Su Yan's wedding date to be set. It was just a week away. The moment the news was confirmed, media outlets across the city began a frenzy of reports. Unsurprisingly, it became the hottest gossip topic in town, talked about at every dinner table. Fortunately, things at Song Corporation were busy, so she had no time or energy to dwell on such scandals. Slowly, Li Boyan also faded from her mind. But Li Boyan didn't let her off so easily. Just as the whole city was buzzing, a wedding invitation was delivered to the hospital. She opened the parcel. The bright red cover of the invitation caught her eye. She frowned and flipped through the card. It was from Su Yan, inviting her to attend the wedding as a relative of the bride. "Inviting your husband's ex-wife to your wedding?" She gave a cold laugh. She didn't need to guess. This was clearly Su Yan trying to provoke her. Sure, Su Yan thought she wouldn't dare to come, or wouldn't even show up. But this time, Su Yan guessed wrong. Her life was finally getting back on track. Thanks to an advance on her salary from Song Zixing and a small bank loan, she had already paid off part of her urgent debts. With a bit more effort, she believed she could settle the rest soon. So she was absolutely going to attend this so-called banquet of doom. As the day approached, she carefully selected a semi-sheer cocktail dress and put on a full face of makeup, all to ensure no one would dare look down on her. She arrived at the wedding venue with a faint smile and handed over the invitation at the reception desk. "Qingwan," a voice called out from behind her, sounding incredulous, trying to confirm her identity. That familiar voice. She turned around at the sound, and the person before her was none other than Song Zixing, the man she had been spending day and night with these past few days. She froze in disbelief for a moment. But thinking it through, it made sense. Song Zixing was a business partner of Li Boyan. Of course he would be invited to such an event to strengthen ties. On the contrary, it was Song Zixing who looked stunned. He had always seen her as pure and sweet, but with just a little dressing up, the radiance she had long kept hidden now shone through again. His eyes flickered. He bent slightly in a gentlemanly manner and extended his hand, his thin lips parting slightly. "Miss Qingwan, would you be interested in accompanying me?" At such an occasion, it was naturally more comfortable to attend with a companion. She nodded with a soft laugh, placing her hand in his warm palm. "Let's go. It'd be rather lonely on my own." The two walked hand in hand, a perfect match in the eyes of the onlookers. After they sat down, she couldn't help but look around. The wedding was held in a European-style hall, but it was decorated in soft pinks, clearly Su Yan's taste. She spaced out for a moment, thinking how ironic it was that 3 years ago, she had rushed into marrying into the Li family without even a proper wedding. The wedding host was chattering on stage, but she paid no attention, quietly sipping her drink. The exchanging of rings, the kiss. Everything went by quickly. The people around her were cheering and applauding, but none of it had anything to do with her. She was just an outsider now. Next came the toasts from the newlyweds, and soon they reached their table. "What are you doing here?" Su Yan's expression froze the moment she saw her. Su Yan had only invited her to show off. She hadn't expected her to actually come. "Su Yan, you're the one who invited me," she retorted sharply. Su Yan had no choice but to clink glasses with her, gritting her teeth as she downed her drink. Just as Su Yan was about to leave, her gaze shifted to Song Zixing by Qingwan's side. The two of them were chatting and laughing intimately, making it impossible not to imagine something more between them. Su Yan often accompanied Li Boyan to social events, so she recognized some of the people in the business world, and she recognized Song Zixing at a glance. She might not fully understand Song Zixing's power, but she knew enough. The Song family was a well-established business dynasty, and its influence in the industry was not at all inferior to the Li family. Su Yan frowned, a vein twitching on her forehead. She hadn't expected that Qingwan, after leaving Li Boyan, could so quickly latch onto someone like Song Zixing. Her eyes reddened with jealousy. Determined not to let her off easy, Su Yan forced a stiff smile and leaned in to whisper while grabbing her hand. Qingwan was confused but stood up anyway, waiting to hear what she had to say. "Qingwan, you really are a little vixen," Su Yan hissed mockingly in her ear. "After everything that happened last time, and now you've managed to seduce Song Zixing? Impressive." Seduced Song Zixing? She glanced back at him, then recalled how their interaction earlier had seemed a bit intimate. Su Yan must have misunderstood their relationship and was clearly upset by it. Since Su Yan couldn't stand to see her doing well, she decided to go along with the misunderstanding. "Yes, Song Zixing treats me very well. You'd better remember to attend our wedding in the future," she said with a bright smile, though her words were laced with daggers. "You." Su Yan's heart turned cold. She had deliberately said that to provoke her. But in the next instant, her expression changed, and she grasped her hand like a loving sister. "Qingwan, you're really something, not telling me such a big thing." Alright, I still have to visit the next table, I'll talk to you later." As soon as Su Yan finished speaking, she tried to shake off her hand and lift her leg to walk away. But just as she took a step, she was suddenly shoved hard in the back. All the force concentrated on her upper body, and she lost her balance, stumbling downward. Su Yan pretended to try to help her, but with her legs hidden beneath the wedding dress, she secretly kicked her hard with her high heel. Without any warning, her flat lower abdomen slammed into the sharp corner of the table, and a wave of stabbing pain swept over her. She clutched her stomach, groaning in pain uncontrollably, her whole body breaking out in a cold sweat. "It hurts, Su Yan, what are you trying to do?" She might be naive, but she wasn't blind. No one else was behind Heronly Su Yan. Other than her, she couldn't think of anyone else who would harm her. Su Yan sneered inwardly but wore an innocent face as she covered her mouth in shock and quickly squatted down, crying out, Qingwan, what's wrong?" Waves of intense pain gnawed away at her fragile consciousness, and it felt as though her lower body had been slashed open. By now, blood was already flooding from her lower half, shocking and vivid crimson spilling everywhere without restraint. She had no idea what was wrong with her, and panic and fear gripped her heart. "Song Zixing, help me!" Things were spiraling out of her control. Her voice quivered with a sob as she spoke through the fog of her fading consciousness, help me. Calling out drained all her strength, and moments later, she collapsed unconscious on the ground. "Qingwan." Song Zixing immediately rushed to her, pushing the obstructive Su Yan aside and scooping her up in his arms, dashing toward the exit. The situation had unfolded too quickly, but Song Zixing had been quick to act and had already called an ambulance in advance. Cradling her as he ran, his hands were soon covered in crimson blood, but he didn't care. The ambulance was already waiting outside. He gently laid her on the stretcher, hurriedly helped settle her in, and then jumped in to follow the nurses. Her mind was muddled. Twice during the ride, she woke up in a daze from the pain, only to pass out again. Terrified, Song Zixing clutched her hand tightly, his eyes fixed on the heart monitor, afraid it might suddenly go flat. The ambulance sped through the streets, and he never left her side. Only when she was finally wheeled into the emergency room did he collapse onto a bench in a daze. Moments later, a nurse rushed out and shouted, "Who's the patient's family?" "I am." Song Zixing stood up. "The patient is suffering from severe uterine bleeding. The baby's life is in critical danger. We need an immediate signature for surgery consent." The nurse handed him a pen and the consent form. "Baby, she was pregnant?" Song Zixing froze for a moment, then hesitantly signed his name in the family section. After that, several more people went in and out of the operating room. It wasn't until the second half of the night that there was any news. The green light over the emergency room lit up. The surgery was a success. She was wheeled out, her face pale as paper. The chief doctor said they had gotten her to the hospital just in time. Her life had been saved by a narrow margin. Qingwan. Song Zixing looked at her, hesitating to speak. She gave a bitter smile and cut him off. "I know I'm pregnant. You don't need to say anything." She allowed herself to be pushed toward the ward, her gaze vacant. Was it really from just that one time? What a cruel twist of fate. After 3 years of hoping, it finally happened, but at the worst possible moment. "Boyan, I'm a little worried about Qingwan. She won't get into any trouble, right?" After the wedding, Su Yan threw herself into Li Boyan's arms, speaking coyly. Li Boyan picked her up, lips curling into a faint smile, but a sudden and inexplicable irritation surged within him. "After everything she did to you, you still care about her?" Su Yan didn't actually care. She just desperately wanted to know how Qingwan was doing. Only if Qingwan was doing badly could Su Yan feel at ease. "Boyan, come with me to see her, okay? After all, we used to have some connection." Su Yan gave him a playful kiss on the cheek, then quickly pulled away. "All right, whatever Yan Yan says goes." Li Boyan gave in completely, letting her have her way. Feigning concern, Su Yan dragged Li Boyan to the hospital. Song Zixing was peeling an apple for Qingwan and couldn't help but blurt out, "So what are you going to do about the child?" She ate happily and mumbled, "That's none of your business. I'll take care of it." Since she didn't want to talk about it, Song Zixing didn't press further. "Qingwan, we came to see you," Su Yan said with a smile, breaking the silence in the hospital room. Li Boyan stood silently behind her. A weasel paying New Year's respects clearly up to no good. Qingwan turned her head and pretended to look at the scenery, ignoring them. Su Yan pulled Li Boyan closer, pretending to be kind as she straightened the blanket. She was about to speak again when the man behind her interrupted. "You're pregnant?" Li Boyan had inadvertently caught sight of the disorganized medical chart. Qingwan quickly grabbed it and hid it under her, denying, "No, you're seeing things." Li Boyan let out a mocking laugh and yanked it from under her. The large characters "pregnant" were impossible to miss. Pointing at them, Li Boyan demanded, "Qingwan, even now, do you still think everyone's a fool? That you can just lead everyone around by the nose with your lies?" Su Yan covered her mouth, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. Qingwan gripped the bedsheet tightly and snapped back, "Li Boyan, you think too highly of yourself. What does my pregnancy have to do with you? It's not even your child." Li Boyan's cold gaze trembled, his pupils shrinking sharply. He grabbed her wrist tightly. "Not mine? Wan Qingwan, you're really shameless. Can't even stay idle for a moment?" Her face flushed red as she instinctively turned away. "If President Li has no further business, please leave. You're not welcome here." There was no point in arguing further. She was clearly showing him the door. Su Yan quickly stood and tugged on Li Boyan, placing a hand on his chest. "Boyan, just take it as me meddling too much. Let's go, don't bother with her." She was afraid. If the child really was Li Boyan's, her position would be in danger. Despite her tugging, Li Boyan didn't budge an inch. Boyan! Su Yan cried out, her voice betraying her anxiety. Li Boyan frowned and pushed her away, his eyes dark and unreadable. I know. The child is mine. As his words pierced the air, she could almost hear the thunderous pounding of her own heart. Her voice wavered slightly, and what makes you so sure? I'm just a low-class, shameless woman, President Li, you're overthinking it. Su Yan tried to push Li Boyan out again but was shoved aside by him. Because you're my ex-wife. Li Boyan's voice was icy cold, the look in his eyes freezing. Unless you go with me for a paternity test, I won't back down. His gaze was resolute. Once Li Boyan made up his mind, no one could change it except science. Her heart sank as she gently touched her still flat stomach. Even she didn't know who the child's father was, yet she was being treated like this. As long as she escaped far enough, she would surely be able to avoid his clutches. With that thought, she immediately arranged for her parents to be discharged from the hospital. Mom, Dad, I have money now. Let's go to a better hospital for your recovery, she said, kneeling before them, doing her best to keep her voice steady. To hide the truth, she told her parents they were going to another city for better medical care. Wonder, wouldn't that cost you too much? Her mother said worriedly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Grabbing both their hands, she forced a smile. Mom, Dad, our company is actually sending me on a business trip there. I can take care of you while I'm at it. Why not kill two birds with one stone? Although her parents hesitated, they eventually agreed after her repeated persuasion. Things progressed more smoothly than she had expected. In just a few more days, their hospital transfer notice would be issued. But reality turned out to be more complicated than she imagined. Someone she didn't know who had let it slip, and the news reached her former mother-in-law, Lin Yu. Wan Qingwan. A familiar, harsh voice rang in her ears. She knew that voice all too well. She'd been scolded by it for 3 years straight. Instinctively, she took a step back, only to remember a moment later that she was no longer the daughter-in-law of the Li family. She didn't need to take this anymore. She lifted her head and looked at her with a calm gaze. What are you doing here? I already have nothing to do with your family. Lin Yu let out a cold laugh and stepped forward, surrounded by her entourage. You may not be part of the Li family anymore, Lin Yu sneered as she gave her a contemptuous once-over, but the child in your belly is. You can't deny that. Child? She stared at her in disbelief, not knowing when she had found out. Lin Yu had been hoping for a grandchild for 3 years with no success. Now that she knew the baby's father, she definitely wouldn't let her off easy. She shook her head frantically, trying to explain. It's not Li Boyan's child. You've misunderstood. She didn't want to explain any further. The more she said, the more likely she was to slip up. But just as she turned to leave, her wrist was suddenly gripped tightly. You think you can still lie to me at this point? Lin Yu sneered and pulled out a copy of a paternity test from her luxury handbag. The black and white text was clear. She had no more excuses. She had originally wanted to keep the baby, but she absolutely refused to become the Li family's breeding machine. To leave, she would do whatever it took, even if that meant having an abortion. This is my child. I have the right to terminate the pregnancy. She stood up straight, refusing to back down. Terminate it? Lin Yu shrieked in disbelief, her sharp nails digging into her flesh. You actually want to terminate it? Yes, she said firmly. Our Li family supported you for 3 years. Can you honestly say we treated you badly? And now, when you've finally gotten pregnant after 3 childless years, you want to get rid of it? Lin Yu roared in the hospital lobby, her presence aggressive and overbearing. It's none of your business, she said coldly, shaking off her hand and turning to leave. Slap. A crisp slap landed on her face, leaving her pale skin red and stinging. Everyone nearby turned to stare. Shame, sorrow, frustration. All her emotions surged at once. She bit her lip, raised her head, and said through gritted teeth, then what exactly do you want from me? If I do get an abortion, what could you even do to stop me? Lin Yu sneered and slowly crouched down, tightening her grip around her neck. I may not be able to do anything to you, but if you really dare to abort the baby. I remember your father is still receiving treatment at the hospital. Lin Yu's eyes were bloodshot like she had gone mad. I can immediately have the doctors stop treating him. Now guess what would happen then? she froze. It was thanks to that expert that her father's condition had been steadily improving. If treatment suddenly stopped, that would be a death sentence for her father. Terrified, she looked up and desperately grabbed Lin Yu's hand to beg. Please, I'm begging you, leave my family alone, they're all I have left. Her parents were her only reason to keep going. She could stand up to Lin Yu for the sake of her pride and dignity, but she couldn't gamble with her parents' lives. She had no capital to bet with. Seeing her reaction, Lin Yu was clearly satisfied and nodded. That's more like it. After you give birth to the child, I'll give you a large sum of money. You can go wherever you want. With a wave of her hand, Lin Yu ordered the people beside her to drag her back into the hospital room. She was like a soulless puppet, letting them move her at will. Moments later, she was pulled into a fully equipped single room. As expected, it was a VIP ward. Starting today, you'll be staying here until you safely give birth to the child. Otherwise, your father. Lin Yu didn't have to finish her sentence. She hurriedly nodded, guilt written all over her face. Satisfied, Lin Yu left the hospital. She was left alone, her eyes trembling uncontrollably as she struggled to hold back the flood of tears. From that day on, her freedom was completely stripped away. At first, she was confined to the hospital room. But later, Lin Yu felt it was unsafe and moved her to a leisure family villa. To ensure everything was under control, the villa was heavily guarded, both inside and out. Several times she tried to sneak out, but each attempt was quickly discovered and stopped by the bodyguards. Over time, she had no choice but to give up the idea entirely. Each day passed in monotony. Aside from being locked up alone, Lin Yu even hired a nutritionist specifically for her. To ensure the baby's future health, the nutritionist prescribed her a regimen of prenatal supplements. Soon, the large desk was covered with the pills she had to take daily. Besides the 3 meals a day, her time was mostly spent taking medication to protect the baby. The days dragged on like this, and slowly, her belly began to grow. Her once light frame became heavier and heavier. Then one day, Su Yan suddenly barged into the villa. Wan Qingwan. Su Yan called from behind her. Even though she recognized Su Yan's voice and didn't want to respond at all, she still turned around. She really couldn't bring herself to like Su Yan. Displeased, she said sarcastically, "What, are you pregnant too and here to rest?" Su Yan clearly wasn't. She quickly waved her hand and sat down beside her. "We've known each other for a while. Even though it wasn't the most pleasant experience, I just came to check on you," Su Yan said with a gentle smile, eyes lowered. Check on her? She let out a bitter laugh. That trick Su Yan had used it too many times. She might not be the smartest, but she could still tell what was real. Thanks, she replied coldly, wanting to end the conversation. But Su Yan had no intention of leaving empty-handed. She thickened her skin and kept nagging at her ear. She was so fed up that she finally spoke, "Su Yan, if you have something to say, just say it. No need to beat around the bush." Su Yan merely let out a light laugh before speaking, "Come take a walk with me on the balcony. I might be living here too in the future." She was about to refuse, but Su Yan quickly added, "Once you go with me, I won't bother you anymore." For the sake of a moment's peace, she gave in. The villa was near the coastline, technically a seaview villa, but she never had the mood to enjoy the view. "It's beautiful. Your mother-in-law really went all out to make sure you could rest and nurture the baby properly. I've never seen her so willing to spend money. She even hired a nutritionist just for you," Su Yan said, leaning her elbow on the railing for support. Her words sounded too strange, making her uneasy. "If you get pregnant, the treatment will be even better," Su Yan added flatly. The sea breeze held in their faces, blowing away the faint sheen of sweat on their skin. "Qingwan, I really envy you," Su Yan said, turning slightly as if to hug her. "You get to live your life as you please, something I'll never be able to do." But she was pushed away without mercy. Qingwan's eyes flickered, trying to determine whether Su Yan was being sincere or just putting on an act. As if to prove her emotions weren't fake, Su Yan began crying, wiping her tears as she spoke. Qingwan sighed helplessly and spread her hands, self-deprecating. "There's nothing to envy. I've lost my freedom too." "But you got the child," Su Yan immediately pointed out. The child was now Su Yan's obsession, and yet Qingwan had gotten there first. Qingwan began, but before she could finish, Su Yan had quietly moved behind her. Just as she was about to speak, a strong force slammed into her back, sending her stumbling forward. The villa's balcony railing was much lower than usual, barely waist high. That short bit of railing was naturally not enough to stop her, and she found herself tumbling forward. This was the third floor of the villa, at least 10 meters high. And she was pregnant. If she fell, she'd either die or be permanently disabled. Driven by the will to survive, she desperately grabbed onto the other side of the railing in that split second. But the railing, damp and corroded from years of seaside exposure, made her hand slip constantly. She hadn't expected Su Yan to be this ruthless. Bitterness filled her heart. Su Yan. You're trying to kill me, she yelled, struggling to hold on with her limited strength. Su Yan's features slowly twisted into something cruel as she leaned over and looked down at her. Wan Qingwan, oh Wan Qingwan. Should I say you're stupid? After all this time, you still haven't learned your lesson. In the end, it was Qingwan's own naive Tesh had thought Su Yan already had Li Boyan, and wouldn't need to use her to feel superior anymore. But clearly, the repeated schemes hadn't been enough. This time, Su Yan was out for blood. Qingwan struggled to climb back up. A single misstep would mean certain death. Time ticked by. Su Yan watched her sweat and tremble with amused interest. Only in moments like this did Su Yan feel truly in control, while Qingwan was nothing more than an ant crushed underfoot. When enough time had passed and Qingwan's strength was nearly gone, barely clinging on. Help! Someone help! Qingwan is trying to jump. Su Yan screamed at the top of her lungs. The bodyguards downstairs quickly realized something was wrong and rushed upstairs. Seeing Qingwan barely hanging on, they worked together to pull her back to safety. Her heart was pounding wildly, and her palms were covered in a fine layer of sweat, as if she had just taken a trip to the gates of hell and returned. Before she could say a word, Su Yan quickly gasped for breath and, with a terrified expression, started complaining to the bodyguard, "Big brother, you have no idea, Qingwan really scared me to death. We were talking just fine, and all of a sudden she said she didn't want to live anymore." Su Yan played the victim first, and by the time she reacted, it was already too late. Thank goodness you all arrived in time. If anything had happened, I really wouldn't know how to face Boyan, Su Yan said while wiping away tears and holding the bodyguard's hand in gratitude. She looked so sincere that if one didn't know her, they might actually be moved by her performance. Lin Yu was constantly monitoring everything happening there, and this incident, naturally, was no exception. Very soon, the bodyguard reported the situation to Lin Yu, who flew into a rage. He smashed things and cursed people at home, wishing he could tear her apart. But she was carrying the only grandson of the Li family. Lin Yu was terrified something might go wrong, couldn't afford that kind of consequence. As a result, her life became even more miserable. Lin Yu added a large number of bodyguards to watch her every move. Even during the day, she was under constant surveillance. But more importantly, Lin Yu confiscated all her means of communication and transportation, didn't even leave her a single phone. Even her daily calls with her parents were cut off. She was completely and utterly cut off from the outside world. She was truly imprisoned in the villa, as if she had been severed from reality. Days of complete isolation dragged on and on. To ensure her safety, Lin Yu even had people inspect her room and belongings daily, as if he wanted to lock her up in the palm of his hand. Each day she woke up, her life was reduced to eating, drinking, going to the bathroom, and being watched. She had no contact with the outside world, no one to talk to or share her thoughts with. The spacious villa felt cold and desolate. Sometimes, she felt like a wandering, restless ghost. Living like this for 10 days or so was still tolerable, but as time dragged on, it became increasingly unbearable. Until one day, all the suppressed emotions reached a breaking point. She couldn't go on like this anymore. She needed to find a way to get their attention. But ever since the last incident, Su Yan had been forbidden from stepping foot into the villa. That meant she had to find an opportunity on her own. If being gentle didn't work, then she'd have to take the hard route. If she wanted to get their attention but without resorting to threats like jumping off a building, there was only one path left: pretending to be insane. She let out a cold laugh. She hadn't expected she would ever sink this low. But reality left her no choice. Her parents were gravely ill and needed her care. She couldn't abandon them. So in order to escape, she had no other option. Even if it meant giving up her dignity. Since she had made up her mind, she would go all in. Resigned, she untied her hair and messily tangled it with both hands without any hesitation. Her head quickly became a bird's nest of disarray. She left her face bare, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, looking even more defeated. Her eyes swept around the room. The villa was decorated with many ornamental blue and white porcelain vases. She turned to the side, struggling to pick one up, then used all her strength to hurl it to the ground. Clang! The sound of porcelain shattering against the tiles pierced the air like thunder. The fragile vase instantly shattered into pieces. Once and no one had noticed yet. No problem then, she'd just keep smashing things. 1, 2, 3, 4. She didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache as countless porcelain vases were destroyed in her hands. The continuous sound of shattering finally drew the attention of the bodyguards outside the door. The iron door was kicked open, and one by one, the black-clad bodyguards rushed in. "Miss Ruan, you're still pregnant. Please show some self-respect," they advised politely yet firmly. But she acted as if she hadn't heard a word, her hands continuing to wreak havoc. The pile of shattered pieces on the floor grew larger and larger. The bodyguards' expressions changed, and their tone turned stern. "We were ordered by Madam to watch over you closely. Since you insist on being unreasonable, don't blame us for being rough. Grab her. Don't let her hurt herself." At the command, 2 bodyguards immediately rushed up behind her and forcefully grabbed her wrists. She was no match for them physically and was instantly overpowered and restrained on the spot. "What the hell are you?" "I'm pregnant with Li Boyan's child. You think you have the right to control me? Ha ha ha, let me go, or you'll regret it," she screamed hysterically, her face twisted with rage. The whites of her eyes were bloodshot, filled with red veins. She looked every bit like a madwoman. The bodyguards froze for a moment, one of them hesitating before speaking. "We're just taking money to do our job, miss. Please don't make this harder for us." They were the ones making things hard for her. Before he could finish, she cut him off without mercy, dragging out her final syllable, "Well, you said it yourself. Then go ahead and do your job properly." Bitter inside, she suddenly turned and bit down hard on the guard's hand, her canine teeth digging in. A faint taste of blood spread through her mouth. The bodyguard instantly jerked back, retreating several steps while staring at the bite wound in disbelief. "You're crazy. You psycho. You bite like a dog." Blood now stained her teeth, but she didn't care. "Ha ha ha, so you found me out? I've got even more tricks up my sleeve. Want to try me?" She licked the corner of her lips and lunged forward as if to attack. The bodyguard clutched his hand and ran out of the room in fear. Tears welled up at the corners of her eyes, her face twisted with fury. "Come on then. If you've got the guts, come at me. I'm waiting." The bodyguards exchanged glances, clearly shaken. At this point, they all thought she must have gone mad. One of them quickly backed out to report to Linyu. Linyu trembled in shock and shouted angrily, "You're all grown men and you can't even handle one woman? She's the crazy one? I think you're the ones who've gone crazy." "Crazy?" Li Boyan, standing beside her in a sharp suit, caught the word with his sharp ears. Seeing his reaction, Linyu realized she couldn't hide it anymore and nodded. Li Boyan's heart stirred slightly. The light in his eyes dimmed as he nodded. "All right. Got it." With that, he grabbed his suit jacket and left. Linyu hurried after him, asking where he was going. To see her. When Li Boyan pushed open the villa door, she was lying on the floor alone, the cold tile seeping chill into her bones. Her already frail body looked even smaller and more pitiful. A strange ache tugged at Li Boyan's ear, an unfamiliar pang of sympathy. "Qingwan." His familiar voice rang in her ears, and she tried to get up but failed. Frowning deeply, Li Boyan quickly walked over and scooped her into his arms, carrying her into the room. "You're pregnant, and you still dare act like that just now? Are you not afraid of catching cold?" He pulled the blanket over her tightly, scolding her. Seeing that her act of feigned madness had worked and even managed to alarm Li Boyan was very pleased. "Li Boyan, what? Afraid I've gone crazy, so you came to check on me," she sneered, but her voice was already hoarse beyond recognition. Even now, she still refused to accept his kindness? Li Boyan's hand froze in midair for a second, then he handed her a cup of water and gently pressed it to her lips. She was stubborn on the outside but soft inside only made her more heartbreaking to watch. Lee Boyan could only watch as she fainted from exhaustion. He pulled the blanket over her carefully. He didn't need to ask, he already knew she wasn't really insane. She was just pretending to be crazy and foolish to gain her freedom. Looking at her defenseless sleeping face, a shadowy, unreadable darkness crept into his eyes. From then on, Lee Boyan began coming to the villa more and more often, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. At first, she remained cold and distant toward him, pushing him away. But gradually, she got used to his presence and began to treat his visits as part of the routine. The relationship between them subtly changed. Lee Boyan would bring her many of the things she used to like. She would say no with a cold mouth, but quietly accept them in the end. Lee Boyan never pointed it out, just kept bringing more the next time. With this repeated interaction, the tension between them softened considerably. The coldness in their expressions gradually faded. Neither of them said anything about it, but in their hearts, a strange feeling began to grow. It was almost like an affair. The moment that thought appeared, she was startled, and quickly shook her head, telling herself she was overthinking. But the truth seemed to be drifting closer and closer to that very idea. Su-Yan clutched a photo in her trembling hand. Lee Boyan hadn't come home for days. She had hired a private investigator to take this picture. In the photo, Lee Boyan was tucking the blanket around the sleeping woman. There was still a faint smile lingering on his lips. They looked incredibly intimate. She couldn't accept this. She and Lee Boyan had only been married for a month, and now Qingwan had shown up again, shattering her life. She loved Lee Boyan. He belonged to her and only her. But now Qingwan had taken him away. All of her jealousy, the burning rage, she directed it entirely at Qingwan. Su-Yan's eyes were full of venom and cold malice as she twisted the photo in her hands. Wrinkling it, smoothing it out again, until Qingwan's face was warped and distorted. Only then did she start tearing it up, piece by piece. Qingwan, just you wait. You're dead. Su-Yan hissed each word in a low, angry growl. Her fury surged like a storm, unrelenting, unforgiving. Miss Wan, here is your prenatal medicine. The housemaid handed her a bowl of pitch-black liquid. The bitter herbal smell was pungent. This was just one of the many times she had been drinking this. At first she hated it, but now she had gotten used to it. She pinched her nose and drank it in one gulp. The maid took the bowl and left. But she had no idea. This time, Su-Yan had added something else into the medicine. A new kind of abortion drug, clear and completely water-soluble. She noticed nothing unusual. Lying idly in bed reading a book, it was one of her rare moments of peace. But before long, her slightly rounded belly began to ache faintly. She thought it was just the baby moving and didn't pay attention. But the pain didn't go away. Instead, it worsened, spreading from her lower body until her entire being was screaming in agony. Help, it hurts, she cried out, struggling to call for the maid, but there was no answer. The white lace nightdress was soon stained red with blood, and everywhere she looked was soaked in a terrifying sea of crimson. She only then realized that things had taken a turn for the worse. Help! Fate gripped her throat. She tried to crawl up but was too weak and fell back down. The pain beneath her was unbearable. Her consciousness began to blur, and her vision grew increasingly unclear. Hell! Before she could finish, her arm dropped limply. The moment Lee Boyan entered the room, his heart tightened sharply. Flustered, he rushed to her bedside. Qingwan! Wake up! There was no response. Only blood was flowing uncontrollably beneath her. Lee Boyan was frantic. He quickly lifted her in his arms and rushed her to the hospital. Her pale face was hurriedly pushed into the operating room. Lee Boyan anxiously wanted to follow but was stopped by the nurses outside the door. Time ticked by. Lee Boyan waited at the entrance, his face dark as iron, radiating a chilling aura. After an unknown amount of time, she was finally brought out of surgery. Lee Boyan hurried forward and grabbed the doctor, demanding, "How is she? Is the baby okay?" The doctor gave him a meaningful look, sighed, and shook his head helplessly. The meaning was clear. But Lee Boyan refused to believe it and asked again, "The baby is gone?" The doctor nodded and patted his shoulder. "My condolences. The surgery had failed. The baby was lost." Lee Boyan looked at her in a daze and followed her back to the ward. The anesthesia from surgery hadn't worn off yet. She lay in bed, drenched in cold sweat. Lee Boyan pulled up a chair, held her hand, and quietly kept watch by her side. Until late at night, her fingers twitched slightly as she slowly regained consciousness. Baby? She reached out to touch her belly. An odd feeling rose in her heart, but she couldn't bear to believe it. Lee Boyan looked into her eyes, hesitated, and then tightly clasped her hands. Her anxiety grew. She propped herself up with her hands and asked urgently, "What's wrong? Tell me. Is the baby still there?" The more anxious she got, the more urgent her tone became. Lee Boyan sighed and gently took her hand. "The doctor said it's a miscarriage." Lee Boyan said the cruel truth slowly and deliberately. "Miscarriage?" She instinctively pressed her palm against her belly, feeling nothing but emptiness. Heaven was playing a cruel joke on her. Just when she thought everything was ready, it cruelly took her child away. For a moment, she didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She stared blankly, then slid down weakly beside the bed. The room fell into an eerie silence. Lee Boyan propped himself up on his elbow, uncertain whether to say what came next. Just a moment ago, her father's attending physician had called to say that her father's heart had stopped, his coronary artery bypass surgery had ruptured. "Your father has also passed," the doctor said with a sigh, the brutal truth spilling out. The news struck like a thunderclap. She shook wildly, tears streaming down. "Impossible, impossible. Father was fine." "You must be lying to me," she said, covering her mouth, teeth chattering uncontrollably. How could her father die? The doctor had said the surgery was successful just a few days ago. How could he cruelly leave her today? Lee Boyan felt heartbroken and pulled out his phone, showing her a photo sent by the doctor. In the picture, her father's face was pale and gray, wearing an oxygen mask, covered in green tubes, and next to him, the heart monitor showed a flat line. And her mother was lying by the bedside, tears streaming down her face. Everyone helped the mother to stand up, and the scene became chaotic for a moment. Clenching her teeth, the heavy smell of blood mixed with bitter tears. She had long expected that this day would come. But she never thought that parting by life and death would happen faster than she imagined. She wasn't ready to face it. She immediately pulled back the covers, turned over, and got out of bed to run out. Even if she were to die, she wanted to see her father one last time, so that she could be completely at peace. Anxiety, panic, fear. Her emotions were on the verge of collapse. She cried and screamed, struggling to lift the quilt and get out of bed. But the anesthesia hadn't fully worn off, her body was weak and limp, and she fell straight to the ground. Bang! Her waist accidentally hit the mobile 4 stand, and she groaned softly. She tried to prop herself up with her elbow, but it was in vain. Suddenly, she felt that living was a joke. Her marriage had failed, she was heavily in debt, and her parents were seriously ill with no way to help. At this point, she couldn't even get up to see her father one last time. She leaned against the headboard, dazed, not daring to think any further, covering her mouth as tears ran down her face. Lee Boyan's heart clenched painfully. He stepped in front of her. He nodded slightly, the shadows cast on his handsome and sculpted face, his eyes stirred with emotion. "People who die cannot come back to life. You have to take care of yourself first, do you understand?" Lee Boyan turned her chin and looked her straight in the eyes. She was still weak from surgery. After crying and struggling for a while, she finally exhausted herself and fell into a deep sleep. Lee Boyan sighed with relief, gently closed the hospital room door, and through the glass window, cast a deep glance. She wasn't sleeping peacefully. Even in her dreams, her brows were tightly furrowed, cold sweat pouring down like a helpless little kitten. Lee Boyan's heart twitched inexplicably, but he stopped and didn't want to disturb her. When everything was over and looking back, he found the situation suspicious. In recent days, apart from her 3 meals and pregnancy maintenance medicine, she had only taken the medicine to maintain the pregnancy. The last heavy bleeding had mostly recovered, so her body should have been fine. Yet, inexplicably, the child was lost. Even the doctors couldn't explain why. Leaning against the wall, Lee Boyan tensed up, unable to stop thinking. He didn't believe it was so simple on the surface. Lee Boyan was never one to accept things halfway. Since this was about her, he was determined to find out the cause. To give her an explanation, to give the child an explanation. And to explain to himself. Check who has been near the villa recently. Give me the list by tomorrow, and don't leave anyone out. Lee Boyan took out his phone and ordered ruthlessly. The villa's butler bowed repeatedly in response. Within 3 hours, the list was quickly delivered to his hands. But the number of people on it was very few. Besides the bodyguards, maids, and Lee Boyan himself, who else could there be? He double-checked, but found no one else. But it didn't make sense. Could the child have just been lost on its own? After a careful investigation, he decided to start checking from the maid who was always by her side. Lee Boyan called the butler to summon the maid, saying he had something to ask. Soon, the maid arrived at the hospital. "Hello, Mr. Lee," the maid said, somewhat guilty. Lee Boyan turned around, his dangerous gaze scanning the maid up and down. A typical rural woman, with a sharp and shrewd look. The nanny lowered her head repeatedly under his intense gaze, not daring to look up. Lee Boyan's eyes darkened slightly as he spoke to remind her, Qingwan had a miscarriage. A miscarriage? The nanny's mouth dropped in shock, and she staggered back a few steps. Lee Boyan sneered coldly, staring at her intently. Did you give her medicine to cause the miscarriage? The icy, piercing question sounded by her ear. The nanny's shoulders trembled twice. She seemed to hear something unbelievable, widening her eyes as she looked up at him. No. I didn't. The nanny raised her voice hurriedly, stepping back to defend herself. The more she tried, the worse it looked, because besides her, no one else had stayed by Qingwan's side the whole time. If it wasn't you, then who else? Could it be that someone else was constantly by her side? Lee Boyan caught the key point and ruthlessly exposed her. The nanny's eyes flickered nervously as she glanced at him. There was no other explanation. All suspicion pointed to the nanny. She shook her head and quickly knelt down, grabbing his clothes. It wasn't me who harmed Miss Ruan, really it wasn't me. The nanny sobbed quietly behind him. Her leg that had been halfway up was pulled back by her. Lee Boyan turned coldly and crouched down to look her in the eyes sarcastically. Where's the evidence? Bring me evidence before you come find me. The ultimatum had been given. The nanny's fingers trembled uncontrollably. Everyone knew the consequences of offending the Lee Corporation's CEO. I'm telling you. She hurriedly stood up and stepped forward to block Lee Boyan. He paused, his eyes signaling her to continue. The nanny swallowed nervously. Actually, it was Miss Ruan's own idea. Her own idea? Lee Boyan's gaze swept over her ominously. The nanny continued to explain, Miss has always been resistant to the CEO's child. After her failed suicide attempt from the last time, she's been brooding over it. She wanted to get rid of the child, so she asked me to put something in her soup. To cause a miscarriage. The nanny hesitated, not daring to look up. Get rid of the child? Lee Boyan repeated that thought, recalling everything from the past few days with her. If anything was off, he would have noticed it long ago. But from every aspect, she showed no abnormalities. He didn't believe it. He didn't believe she would give up on life so easily. Just as he was about to press her for more, his phone rang. Interrupted at a critical moment, Lee Boyan furrowed his brows. Seeing the caller ID, Su Yan, he inexplicably became irritated but had no choice but to answer. Hello. Boyan Su Yan's weak voice was choked with sobs from the other end. Lee Boyan lowered his eyes, feeling a cold chill rise in his heart. What's wrong with you? At this question, Su Yan's tears burst out uncontrollably, streaming down like a flood. Boyan, I heard Qingwan had a miscarriage. I want to come see her. Su Yan cried loudly, her words jumbled and out of order. My leg's broken. I was hit by a truck. I'm so scared. Can you come see me? The call was cut off unexpectedly, which annoyed him. Fine, where are you? Su Yan quickly gave the hospital address, pleading for Lee Boyan to come as soon as possible. He hung up and looked at the trembling nanny, about to ask her the next question. But the phone rang again. It was still Su Yan. She was urging him to hurry over. Anxious and upset, Lee Boyan grabbed his keys and rushed to her hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital, Su Yan had been eagerly waiting for a long time. She was the one who drugged her, and had bribed the nurse, so naturally, Lee Boyan must not find out. Determined, she even decided to injure herself seriously to win his sympathy. After all, it wasn't a bad trade-off. Boyan. When Su-Yen saw him enter, she immediately wanted to rush to him, but since her foot was in a cast, she could only hold on to the bed and lie still. Is it serious? Lee Boyan turned around and locked the door behind him casually, but his mind was already on her. Su-Yen nodded slightly, pulling at his sleeve while softly sobbing. It really hurts, Boyan, can you comfort me? Lee Boyan raised his eyes, the deep pupils reflecting Su-Yen's wronged expression. For some reason, he didn't feel a shred of pity. All his thoughts were focused on another person, he didn't spare even a bit of tenderness for Su-Yen. Okay, I'll call the doctor to give you some more painkillers. Lee Boyan's whole body was cold and distant, and he pried her hand open and turned to leave. Lee Boyan! Su-Yen shouted hoarsely from behind, but he didn't stop. Her hatred had nowhere to vent. Ever since Lee Boyan got close to Wan Qingwan, his attitude toward her was extremely cold, even indifferent. And all of this was because of that wretched woman. After the miscarriage, Lee Boyan stayed by her side day and night. Her condition gradually improved. But her heart was long gone from Lee Boyan. No matter what he did, it couldn't be salvaged, and she naturally didn't want to be trapped by him. So whenever she had a chance, she tried to sneak away. But time and again, she failed. Wan Qingwan, you can't escape my grasp. Give up struggling. She lost count of how many times she had tried to escape, but Lee Boyan's cold voice echoed like a nightmare again. She bribed hospital staff to cover for her, thinking this time it was certain. But unexpectedly, she was caught and brought back by Lee Boyan's men. She was unwilling to be trapped in this little cage. She didn't belong here. But Lee Boyan refused to let go. Lee Boyan, why do you always do this? We have nothing to do with each other anymore. Go find your Su-Yen. She screamed, heartbroken, grabbing a hard object and throwing it toward him. Lee Boyan habitually dodged to the side and stepped forward to grab her arm. What, you really want to leave me? Lee Boyan stared into her clear eyes, a hint of dissatisfaction flickered in his. He could give her anything she wanted, so why did she want to escape? Her hands were restrained, and she glared back at him unhappily. She hated him for not letting her see her father one last time, for repeatedly disrupting her life. Without him, she could live well. So she wanted to go, to get far away from this painful place. She struggled fiercely, trying desperately to escape Lee Boyan's control. But his strength was astonishing, all her resistance seemed powerless at this moment. Please, let go, okay? I swear I won't have anything to do with you anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes as she trembled. Let's each live our own lives and go far away, okay? She pleaded bitterly, just hoping he would give her a way out. He lifted the hem of her skirt and was just about to enter when she couldn't help but let out a startled cry. Her memory blurred, overlapping with his figure from 2 months ago. The same domineering demeanor, but when she thought about the outcome, she involuntarily trembled, and tears slid down from the corners of her eyes. Please. Don't, she forced out a few words through gritted teeth. Lee Boyan's body paused, his movements coming to a halt. The sight of her tears tugged at his heartstrings, and the fury that had consumed him instantly dissipated. She began to sob softly, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. He had nearly taken her, but at the crucial moment, Lee Boyan released her shoulders and rolled off the bed. All he had wanted was to punish her for her defiance, but in the end, he relented. Lee Boyan vaguely sensed that something in him was beginning to change, though he didn't dare admit it. As soon as he left, she instantly felt lighter and quickly pulled up her disheveled top to cover herself. Thank you. For letting me go, she wiped her tears, her voice sincere. With his back to her, Lee Boyan's expression kept shifting. He remained silent for a long time. The atmosphere suddenly became eerily quiet. She wanted to say more to his broad back, but Lee Boyan had lost all interest. He raised his foot and walked out the door. Though she had narrowly avoided disaster this time, it was only by sheer luck. However, Lee Boyan didn't let his guard down. Instead, he tightened the surveillance around her. The moment she stepped out of her hospital room, she could feel someone shadowing her every move, never more than a few paces away. If she walked even a little too far, it would be reported to Lee Boyan. It was practically imprisonment. She secretly tried to escape again, but as expected, she was caught and could only look for a safer method. That day, the weather was bright and sunny. After receiving a phone call, Song Zixing rushed to the hospital. His old friend had been in a serious car accident, and he had to come visit. Yo, Song Zisheng, I've finally waited long enough for you to come see me. His old racing buddy slung an arm over his shoulder, holding up the fruit basket Song had brought. You weren't careful. Look at you got into trouble, didn't you? Song Zisheng tapped the cast on his friend's leg. Though he sounded like he was scolding, he was clearly teasing. The old friend peeled a banana and took a big bite, mumbling, You're always so busy. Lucky I got hurt or I'd never see you. Song Zisheng chuckled helplessly and nudged his chest. You're still cracking jokes after a car crash? Maybe you should have been hurt worse. The old friend played along instantly, clutching his chest and groaning in mock pain. A few others who hadn't seen each other in a while joined in the banter, and the atmosphere in the hospital room turned cheerful. After some playful teasing, Song Zisheng checked the time and waved goodbye. As he looked down at his phone, a small crumpled note hit him in the face. I'm Qingwan. Song Zisheng, help me. The writing was rushed and messy, clearly scribbled in a hurry. After reading it, Song Zisheng quickly looked around. She was leaning against the small glass window of a nearby room. The moment he spotted her, she let out a small sigh of relief. Song Zisheng frowned. It had already been several months since she was diagnosed as pregnant. He had assumed she was just busy and couldn't reach out. He never imagined she'd been imprisoned by Li Boyan all this time. What a brutal and unreasonable man. Song Zisheng let out a low sigh and walked sideways to the door of the room. He raised his hand to turn the doorknob, but the door didn't open as expected. Instead, it was tightly locked and wouldn't budge. Feeling anxious, she knocked on the glass window and mouthed something to him. Song Zisheng could clearly make out her lip movements. She was saying, There's someone beside me, be careful. He quickly scanned the surroundings, and sure enough, a few people were scattered around, all coincidentally glancing in their direction. All the exits were blocked by them. Frowning, he carefully mapped out an escape route in his mind. Got it. There, near the emergency exit it was poorly guarded, with only a few scattered patients standing nearby. That was the breakthrough. Song Zisheng gave her a hand signal and began casually circling the ward a few times, seemingly without purpose. Once the guards relaxed their vigilance, he suddenly turned around and kicked the door open. She had already been prepared. Grabbing his hand, she dashed out with him at full speed. By the time the others reacted, the two had already locked the emergency exit behind them and escaped down the stairs. Song Zisheng ran through multiple red lights with her in tow, finally shaking off the pursuers and bringing her home. Looking at the minimalist furniture in Song Zisheng's house, she finally felt grounded. At last, she was no longer imprisoned by that devil Li Boyan. She didn't act like a guest at all and immediately flopped onto the soft sofa. She rolled around back and forth on the couch, her heart full of joy. Song Zisheng chuckled and couldn't help teasing her, childish. She puffed up in protest and snapped back at him. The two bickered playfully, forming a stark contrast with the suffocating atmosphere back at the hospital. Just then, news of Qingwan's escape reached Li Boyan. She ran? Li Boyan slammed the table and glared furiously at the men before him, unable to hold back his rage. A bunch of grown men can't even keep watch over a sickly woman? Do you still want your jobs? The men begged for mercy, and one of them protested indignantly. She wasn't alone, she had an accomplice. Accomplice? Li Boyan repeated the word in his mind, and immediately, an all-too-familiar figure popped into his head. Forget it. I won't blame you guys. You may go. He turned away, his expression unreadable. Knowing Li Boyan's ruthless methods, if he had truly set his sights on punishing them, there would have been no mercy. The men, stunned by his leniency, fled as if granted a royal pardon, afraid he might change his mind. Li Boyan pulled out his phone and made a mysterious call. Soon after, the hospital's surveillance footage was sent to his computer. The timestamp matched the hours she had gone missing. Li Boyan stared unblinkingly at the footage. Soon, an unmistakably familiar figure appeared on the screen. He didn't even need to look closely, he recognized Song Zisheng at a glance. Slamming the laptop shut, the veins on his forehead began to pulse. Again and again, Song Zisheng always showed up to ruin his plans. With a violent motion, he smashed the computer, screen and keyboard shattering across the floor. Take a team and raid Song Zisheng's place. Qingwan must have been taken by him. If you don't bring her back, I'll hold you personally responsible. Staring into the boundless night, Li Boyan roared into the phone. His assistant, frightened out of his wits, scrambled to mobilize the men. That night, Song Zixing's villa was surrounded inside and out. The commotion outside could be heard even through the windows. She was the first to wake up and pulled the curtain open just a crack. A familiar, sharply dressed figure stood tall in the center. It was Li Boyan. She quickly got up and rushed to knock on Song Zixing's bedroom door. Song Zixing, still half asleep, furrowed his brows and glanced around groggily. Soon after, the doorbell rang. He tidied his collar and led Qingwan into the study before heading to open the door. Song Zixing, hand Qingwan over, Li Boyan growled through clenched teeth, his fist slamming hard onto the armrest. Rubbing his eyes, Song Zixing feigned confusion in his sleepy voice. Qingwan? Isn't she supposed to be with you? Li Boyan had no patience for word games. With a wave of his hand, the people behind him rushed into the house. He must have been furious. No one expected him to use force. Song Zixing spread his arms and blocked their way, voice sharp and stern. This is trespassing. Li Boyan let out a cold laugh, murderous intent flickering in his eyes. He, the golden boy Li Boyan, had never cared much for the law. Weren't you the one who took Qingwan away today? Li Boyan pulled out a screenshot from a surveillance video. Song Zixing's figure was clearly visible on the screen. Song Zixing's body tensed. He hadn't expected the camera to be pointed directly at him. His gaze wavered, but he forced himself to stay calm. Yes, I did. But I let her go in the afternoon. I have no idea where she went after that. He lied without even blinking. Li Boyan sneered and even tried using the company as leverage to prove Qingwan was still here. But Song Zixing remained unmoved, firmly standing in the doorway without yielding an inch. No matter how Li Boyan threatened or coaxed, Song Zixing refused to give in. And so, the standoff lasted through the night. With morale low, Li Boyan had no choice but to retreat. After closing the door, Song Zixing slumped against it, utterly drained, as if he had just emerged from a battle. Because of all this, Qingwan was so frightened she didn't dare step outside again. These days, she lived like a turtle hiding in its shell, staying inside Song Zixing's home all day. The apartment's design was quite clever. When the curtains were drawn open, sunlight filled every corner of the room, just like Song Zixing himself. Song Zixing still went to work during the day, but he would often leave early just for her. When he wasn't home, she would nap on the sun-drenched sofa bed, basking in the golden warmth. Each time she woke up, all her fatigue would be swept away. After a long, satisfying stretch, it would almost be time for Song Zixing to return. She would then change into something proper and wait by the door for him to come home. Every day, Song Zixing brought her some unexpected little gift. Sometimes it was freshly released salted egg yolk pastries from a trending bakery, other times a new lipstick from a luxury brand. There was nothing he couldn't buy, only things she couldn't think of. Every day was filled with delightful surprises. Song Zixing's sunny, warm humor lit up her world and slowly healed the wounds inside her. All the past grudges, entanglements with Li Boyan and Su Yan, gradually faded from her mind. But she and Song Zixing weren't family or lovers. Although he didn't mind her presence, it just wasn't right for her to stay at his place forever. Today, Song Zixing came home early. She sat at the dining table and absent-mindedly picked at her food. Her mind was elsewhere. The meal was tasteless, like chewing on wax. Eventually, she simply put down her chopsticks and quietly stared at Song Zixing's calm side profile. The atmosphere was unusually peaceful. How's the taste? Is it good? She propped her chin up with both hands, blinking curiously at him. Without much thought, Song Zixing nodded and continued putting more food into her bowl. You might not get to eat it for much longer. She lowered her eyes in guilt, but still forced herself to speak those cruel words. Song Zixing's arm, extended in midair, suddenly froze. It took him a moment to come back to his senses and withdraw it. What did she mean by that? Although you've taken good care of me, I still want to leave this city and start my life over. Song Zixing was stunned. His hand trembled slightly, and his chopsticks slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. The sharp sound struck him like a blow to the heart. He hurried to pick them up and waved it off, covering his confusion with a light chuckle. That's great. Have you decided which city you're going to? He asked casually while wiping the chopsticks clean with a napkin. She shook her head and got up to clear the dishes. Not yet, but it definitely won't be here. Maybe I'll never come back. Never come back? He had thought she would stay for him. Song Zisheng let out a small laugh. In the end, it was all just his wishful thinking. You really won't reconsider? Believe me, I'll protect you. She had already guessed he would say that. Her eyes flickered as she clutched the hem of her shirt and shook her head firmly. 3 years of torment, being framed, losing her parents. It all happened in this nightmare of a city. This place of heartbreak, she only wanted to leave it far behind. She might seem gentle on the outside, but once she made up her mind, she never backed down. Seeing that her decision was final, Song Zisheng had no choice but to give up. He nodded helplessly. If you ever need anything, just call me. Since he couldn't stop her, he could only respect her decision. After all, she had stayed at his place for so long. No matter what, he felt a bit indebted. This is a small token to make up for that time. She took out a Swarovski men's bracelet. It was something she had saved up for with her limited money. Though not very expensive, it carried her sincerity. This was the last memento she left for Song Zisheng. He didn't refuse and accepted it. She had already packed her things. The next day, she boarded a southbound train and left. Song Zisheng stood on the platform, watching her train disappear into the distance, becoming a mere dot, before walking away, lost and hollow. Though she left the city, Song Zisheng never gave up on keeping an eye on her. He secretly arranged for someone to follow her and send him updates from time to time. He didn't want anything else, only for her to be safe. And if anything happened, he could appear by her side at once to protect her. After reading the latest update on her situation, Song Zisheng closed the page. Now, it was time for him to fulfill the last task Qingwan had given him. Li Boyan, I lied to you. Song Zisheng lifted his legs and sat across from Li Boyan, his voice growing heavier. Qingwan's still with you, isn't she? Come on, take me to her. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Li Boyan grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. Noticing the urgency and worry etched on Li Boyan's handsome face, Song Zisheng let out a faint, ironic laugh. As Qingwan had predicted, Li Boyan still couldn't let go. Since that's the case, he might as well give him a push. Song Zisheng abruptly shook off his hand, a mocking smile curling at the corner of his lips. Li Boyan, I lied to you. Qingwan, she's never coming back. She'll never return to you again. It was like a bolt from the blue, shattering all of Li Boyan's hopes. He had finally rediscovered his true feelings and thought he could spend the rest of his life with her. But things didn't go as he had hoped. The light faded from Li Boyan's eyes, his blood ran cold. He couldn't believe it. Impossible. Tell me where she is. Even if it's the ends of the earth, I'll find her. She's dead. Li Boyan froze, his whole body trembling stiffly, his face turning a ghastly shade of pale. Dead? She actually dared to leave him behind like that? Blood-red veins instantly filled his eyes. In a near-maniacal rage, Li Boyan grabbed Song Zisheng by the neck and started to strangle him. Struggling to breathe, Song Zisheng kicked and pushed with all his strength to break free. Qingwan, you really are heartless. Song Zisheng's heart sank. He had expected Li Boyan to be furious, but not this insane. I know you don't believe it, but it's the truth. Song Zisheng didn't hold back. He pulled a photo from his pocket. It was a picture of a gravestone. Carved clearly in the center were the words, Daughter of the Wan family, Wan Qingwan. Next to the bold, upright script was a black and white memorial portrait. Qingwan's smiling face remained captured there, disturbingly eerie. With both proof and evidence laid out, there was no room for denial. Li Boyan burst into a cold, furious laugh, his eyes locked onto Song Zisheng as he pointed toward the door. Get out. I don't want to see you. Get as far away from me as possible. His overwhelming fury erupted onto Song Zisheng, who said nothing more, only rising and leaving in frustration. Emotion surged like a tidal wave in Li Boyan's chest. He stared hatefully at the photo. Song Zisheng actually said she was dead? And even made a tombstone for her? Li Boyan's lips curled into a mocking, cold smile, his voice trembling uncontrollably. He didn't believe it. With a swipe of his hand, he tore the photo of the gravestone to shreds. That woman had always been so tenacious. How could she just leave so easily? Impossible. Li Boyan's hands trembled, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He stared blankly at the floor, lost in thought, before finally coming to. He only believed what he saw with his own eyes. Unless he personally saw her body, he wouldn't believe a single word. Li Boyan grabbed his keys and drove to every place she might have gone. But after combing through most of the city, well into the night, he still had no leads. Furious, he slammed his hand on the steering wheel, and the horn blared loudly in his ears. Just then, the former housekeeper, returning from grocery shopping, recognized his car at a glance. Terrified, she dropped her bags and turned to run. But everything had already been seen by him. Ignition. Acceleration. Turn. His movements were swift and fluid, drifting into a sharp turn that blocked her path before she could get away. She stumbled backward in fear. She turned to run again, but it was too late. She was cornered against a wall by Li Boyan. "President Li, I no longer work at the Li household. Please, I beg you spare me." The housekeeper dropped to her knees, kowtowing repeatedly. Her 10 fingers scraped desperately against the rough cement ground until they started to bleed. Her trembling body gave away the truth. Didn't even need to interrogate her? Li Boyan cast her a cold, disdainful glance and got out of the car. "I can let the past go, forgive everything you've done before. But you have to tell me everything. The full truth." Towering above her, Li Boyan looked down coldly. The housekeeper dared only a quick glance before fear overtook her again. "President Li, please don't make it hard for me, I have a whole family to care for." Make it hard? He never made things hard for anyone. This card has 5 million on it. No password. Is that enough to buy one piece of information from you? Li Boyan flicked a discreet black gold card onto the ground in front of her. The nanny was immediately stunned, staring blankly at the card. 5 million? An astronomical amount. She might never have the chance to earn so much money in her entire life. Her heart struggled, but there was no reason to go against money or anyone. The nanny hurriedly picked up the gold card from the ground, rubbed it gently, then tremblingly put it into her bag. Since she had accepted the card, the information had to be sold. Actually, the abortion pills Miss Qingwan took were not taken by herself. The naked truth. He had long suspected it. So, who gave her the pills? Before she could answer, Li Boyan's heart trembled. Somehow, he thought of the woman who spent every day and night with him. It was Miss Yan Yan. Unexpected, yet reasonable. Of course it was her. Li Boyan waved his hand, and the nanny immediately withdrew. He was left standing there, stunned. He once thought the woman he loved most had betrayed him, cruelly hurting the innocent as well. What kind of disgusting soul hides beneath such a beautiful appearance? Dazed, he returned home. As soon as he entered, Su Yan hurried over, smiling as she helped him take off his shoes. "Boyan, you came home early today. Are you tired?" Su Yan reached out to hold his hand but was effortlessly ignored as he turned away. Her smile stiffened slightly, sensing something was wrong, but Su Yan didn't take it to heart. After all, Li Boyan rarely came home these days, she had to cherish the opportunity. "Boyan, the company must have been very busy these past 2 days. You're coming home later and later, I was so worried." Su Yan hinted subtly, trying to pry some information from him. Even now, she was not satisfied. But he was done with being patient. "Was it you who gave Qingwan the abortion pills?" After changing clothes, he didn't beat around the bush, the cold question was already out. He already knew? Su Yan looked up in disbelief. She had thought she could keep this matter hidden. But she didn't expect Li Boyan to find out. No. Su Yan immediately denied it emphatically. Without evidence, she naturally wouldn't admit it. As long as she didn't confess, Li Boyan couldn't do anything to her. But at that moment, the anxious look on her face had already been caught by Li Boyan's eyes. Li Boyan had long guessed the truth, almost certain. Seeing Li Boyan remain silent, Su Yan's heart was tightly suspended. "Boyan, you can't have believed those rumors from outside, right?" Su Yan pretended to be surprised, covering her mouth and raising her voice. "You can't just believe whatever others say, I'm still your wife." "No." Li Boyan's indifferent voice sounded. Just 2 brief words, and Su Yan sensed the situation was worse than she thought. Su Yan quickly stepped forward, grabbing Li Boyan's arm, pouting and swaying from side to side. I don't care who you've listened to. Anyway, you suspect me now. I'm angry. I need your comfort and kisses to feel better. After saying that, she immediately closed her eyes, tilted her head back, and leaned in. Normally, they would have been tangled up by now. But this time, Li Boyan did not respond. With a blank expression, he pushed her away. Su Yan stared at him in shock, but all she got in return was a cold, indifferent face. Without looking at her again, Li Boyan immediately opened the door and left the villa, leaving Su Yan alone in the empty house. Back at the hotel, Li Boyan couldn't help but recall Su Yan's reaction at that moment. No surprises, Su Yan was most likely the culprit who drugged Qingwan. Thinking about how this woman actually had such a dark side, Li Boyan couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. If it was someone close to him, he had to investigate thoroughly. Li Boyan immediately spent a huge amount of money to hire the city's best private detectives and sent them to investigate Su Yan's background. They were very efficient. Within a few days, they faxed the information back to Li Boyan. Glancing quickly over the basic info, the details below made him stunned. Su Yan's supposedly serious car accident with a fractured bone was recorded in hospital files as just a sprained ankle? Looking further back, the previously exposed news by the media about Su Yan being abused by her ex-husband was actually a marketing stunt she paid for herself. There were also records of her purchasing abortion drugs. One after another, all these pieces of evidence exposed her crimes publicly. After reading it all, Li Boyan's aura turned cold, as if he had stepped into an ice cellar. The woman he once deeply loved had used so many underhanded means to get close to him. She even sacrificed an innocent life just to possess him. A wave of chills rose up from his guts. Since Li Boyan learned the truth, he never returned to the Li family villa. No need to guess, he was deliberately avoiding Su Yan. Su Yan had originally thought that with his fondness for her, he would eventually be unable to resist loneliness and come back to her. But this time, he truly hardened his heart. Day after day, week after week, Su Yan still didn't see him return. Her heart burned with anxiety. She had painstakingly planned, step by step, to seduce and deceive his love and marriage. But was it all going to be destroyed just like that? She was unwilling and refused to give up. She opened the drawer and took out the drug from the very back. A love potion. This was her last hope. Su Yan bribed the detective and rushed straight to the 5-star hotel where Li Boyan was staying. She ground the drug into powder and secretly sprinkled it into Li Boyan's cup. Whether she could turn the tables depended on this. Li Boyan pushed open the door. Su Yan hurried to take his suit, but he was cold and pushed her roughly to the ground. Su Yan neither got angry nor upset and still shamelessly clung to Li Boyan. Maybe the old Li Boyan would have softened. But he already knew the truth. Everything she was doing now made him feel disgusted. Boyan, you must be thirsty, have some water first, Su Yan said excitedly, handing him the cup, but he ignored her. Li Boyan glanced at her with a warning in his eyes. He turned and went back to his room, opened his computer to work. Su Yan patiently waited nearby. Finally, when Li Boyan was thirsty, he raised the cup and drank it all in one go. He drank it. Su Yan took back the cup, quietly waiting for his next reaction. Just as she expected. Soon, Li Boyan's neck flushed red up to his ears, heat surged throughout his body, and his eyes became somewhat hazy. The drug was taking effect. His mind was restless. Li Boyan impatiently tugged at his tie, his rising chest half exposed in front of her. You drugged the water? Li Boyan suppressed his voice, speaking with displeasure. Su Yan didn't answer. Seeing Li Boyan's awareness gradually being invaded, she rejoiced inwardly and quickly took off her jacket, sitting on his lap. Her purposely worn short skirt barely covered her thighs, and with the large movements, the roots of her legs were already faintly visible. Su Yan twisted her waist and pressed against Li Boyan, her thigh constantly rubbing against him, repeatedly stirring his fragile nerves. Get lost, Li Boyan forced down his desire, gritting out the words from the corner of his mouth. Thinking about Su Yan's deceit and schemes, all he felt for her now was endless disgust. Su Yan pretended to seduce him by lowering her neckline, her cleavage pressing against Li Boyan. Boyan, I want you. Will you give me one more time, please? She deliberately whispered into his ear, lowering her voice to sound soft and sweet. You're too lowly, Lee Boyan sneered coldly and pushed her away mercilessly. He called security, and the disheveled Su Yan was grabbed and thrown out of the hotel, with passers-by pointing fingers at her. The next day, Lee Boyan went on a business trip out of town and boarded a plane leaving the city. After finishing the case and returning to the hotel, a familiar figure appeared before his eyes. Qingwan wore a neat bun, the depression from months ago completely wiped away. Qingwan, is that you? Lee Boyan stepped forward and lightly patted her shoulder. Her almond-shaped eyes turned to look at him, but were full of hesitation. I've been looking for you for so long, finally found you. His once gloomy and stern face finally showed a trace of joy from the reunion. Qingwan looked surprised and hurriedly pushed his arm away. Who are you? I don't know you. The momentary panic and surprise didn't seem fake. Lee Boyan was at a loss, unsure if she really had amnesia or was deliberately trying to deceive him. Seeing him silent, just staring blankly, she found it strange, muttered strange, and then turned to leave. After finally finding her, she treated him like a stranger? He couldn't accept it, nor would he believe it. Since he already knew which city she was in, finding her address wouldn't be difficult. After pulling a few strings, Qingwan's address and contact info were already in his hands. Since force wasn't working, this time he would try softness. To see her every day, Lee Boyan rented a place opposite hers for twice the market price. They became neighbors, seeing each other whenever they looked up or down. Hello, delivery for you. Lee Boyan held up a cake and knocked on her door with a smile. She didn't hesitate and immediately opened the door. But upon seeing Lee Boyan, her expression darkened and she lowered her eyes, asking coldly, why is it you? If you don't have business, I'll close the door. Saying that, she reached out to close the door. Lee Boyan was quick to block it with his arm. Qingwan saw this and didn't try to push him away. You have a terrible memory. Today is your birthday, aren't you going to celebrate it properly? Lee Boyan raised an eyebrow, ignoring her cold attitude as he spoke to himself. This is the cake I prepared for you. It's filled with your favorite fruits. Won't you invite me in to sit for a while? Remembering the date, it really was her birthday. She and Lee Boyan had known each other for so many years, and this was the first time he was taking the initiative to celebrate her birthday. Seeing Lee Boyan's sincere expression, she couldn't bear it and let him in. Qingwan's room was simply decorated, with only some basic kitchen and bathroom utensils, not looking like a place meant for long-term living. Lee Boyan was puzzled but didn't ask. He carefully placed the cake on the table and unwrapped it. This was a custom-made gift by Lee Boyan for her, and the birthday blessing was already written right in the center of the cake. She didn't know what to do for a moment, quietly leaning her back against the doorframe, watching Lee Boyan busy himself here and there. Soon, the evenly sliced pieces of cake were placed in front of her. Come on, make a wish. It was the first time she had received a birthday gift from Lee Boyan. Her nose tingled with emotion, and she quickly closed her eyes to hold back the tears. When she opened them again, Lee Boyan had already taken the initiative to sit on the living room sofa and warmly invited her to sit down. Rubbing her eyes, her mood was complicated as she finished eating the cake. From that day on, the relationship between her and Lee Boyan began to change subtly. Every morning, Lee Boyan would come to disturb her to wake her up and thoughtfully prepare breakfast for the day. After work in the evening, he would wait at the community gate to greet her home early. At first, it felt a bit awkward, but gradually she adapted to the change in life. And it even developed into a feeling that if Lee Boyan wasn't around for a day, she would feel uncomfortable all over. Only then did she suddenly realize that Lee Boyan had slowly seeped into her life bit by bit. It was time to break free. The next day, Lee Boyan knocked on her door as usual. But this time, unlike before, he didn't see Qingwan's sleepy face. Instead, it was opened by a stout auntie who scolded him in thick, imperfect Mandarin. Who is it? Don't you let people sleep early in the morning? Lee Boyan frowned and pushed inside, only to see that all traces of her life had been erased. Including Qingwan. Looking at the empty room and the new residents who had moved in. Overnight, everything had changed beyond recognition. Lee Boyan stood stunned for a moment, his body stiff, standing in place, the blood in his body chilling uncontrollably. She had left him again, without even a single confession. Behind him were the noisy moving company and bustling sounds. He silently returned to the house. He had lived here because of her, and since she was gone, there was no need to stay any longer. But he would not give up easily. Once he had decided on something, he wouldn't let go. Lee Boyan set out on a journey to find her. He already had all her personal information from kindergarten, elementary school, all the way through university and work. If she wouldn't come back, then he would search one by one. Following the addresses given by a private detective, he went to various places again and again looking for her. But time after time, he just missed her. However, this time, he finally found her again. She had settled in a small city in the south, preparing to find a job, buy a house, and take out a loan, busy every day with barely a moment to spare. At that moment, Lee Boyan appeared once again in front of her. She had just come home carrying a large bag of daily necessities from the supermarket when the familiar deep voice rang from above. "Qingwan, I finally found you." She turned around in disbelief, his handsome face no more than a foot away, frightening her so much she kept stepping back. "It's you again, what do you want?" She picked up her groceries and pointed at Lee Boyan's nose, scolding him. She had escaped her original residence, partly because of this man. But she hadn't expected that in the end, she still couldn't escape him. Lee Boyan looked at the fragile and delicate person in front of him, feeling a slight stir of pity and couldn't help reaching out to touch her face. "What are you doing?" Without thinking, she pushed Lee Boyan away, maintaining a safe distance between them. But with Lee Boyan's actions below, she instantly froze on the spot. Lee Boyan took out a delicate, small black box from his pocket, knelt down on one knee, and looked up at her. "I, Lee Boyan, am proposing to Miss Ruan Qingwan today." Ever since he learned the truth about everything, he had prepared to propose. Because she belongs to Lee Boyan, and can only belong to Lee Boyan. He was confident he could win her back. Lee Boyan pressed the button on the box, and the diamond ring reflected the sunlight so brightly that it dazzled her eyes, making her instinctively rub them. His action immediately attracted the surrounding crowd's attention, and soon several circles of people gathered, craning their necks to see what was going on. Countless burning gazes shot toward the two of them. Even without words, they were silently pressuring her to make a decision. Under the scorching sunlight, beads of sweat appeared on Lee Boyan's forehead. Everyone was waiting for her to make a choice. After so many days of pretending to have amnesia, Lee Boyan still persistently pursued her. It was not untrue to say she was touched. But the pain caused by her past memories was still hidden deep inside her heart. To say she didn't care would be a lie. For a moment, she was at a loss, staring blankly at him kneeling on the ground. Memories flooded back again, and she steeled her heart. "Sorry, I can't accept you right now." Her firm attitude made Lee Boyan's heart tremble, and time seemed to freeze at that moment. She turned her face aside, unwilling to see the disappointment in his eyes. "But there will be a chance in the future." His once dispirited heart was instantly rekindled with hope, and Lee Boyan saw a glimmer of light. Seeing that the two showed no further development and there was no more spectacle to watch, the crowd lost interest and dispersed with a shrug. The once noisy crowd was now left with just the two of them. No clear rejection, no clear acceptance. Their relationship began to become ambiguous because of this farce, although neither spoke it, their hearts slowly began to accept it. Qingwan didn't move back to her old place, but was half pushed, half led by Lee Boyan into the adjacent, opposite apartment. That was Lee Boyan's room. Since it was a single-bedroom apartment, she decisively took the big bed as her own, while the poor Lee Boyan started the sad life of sleeping on the sofa. But he was happy about it. As long as she didn't mind, Lee Boyan would always follow behind her, chasing after her until she gradually accepted him and could never get rid of him. He knew all this would take time. But he was willing to give it, using time as a healing balm to mend her wounds. As long as the ending was good, that was enough. Except when Qingwan went to work, Lee Boyan was almost always by her side. When he was sending Qingwan to work, to avoid unwarranted suspicion caused by the luxury car, she deliberately planned to get off 10 minutes early and walk to the company. But Lee Boyan grabbed her back, coming close to her side, and whispered teasingly in her ear. "You're my woman now, why hide and run? Am I so shameful to show off?" It wasn't that he was ashamed to be seen, it was that she was too well known, she instinctively wanted to avoid hurtful rumors. "Stop joking." She pushed him away from her chest, but the blush on her face betrayed her nervousness. Li Boyan curled his lips and insisted on sending her to her company. Since then, rumors spread at Qingwan's new company that she was being kept by a wealthy man. Li Boyan didn't shy away at all. Instead, he made a point of coming and going from her company openly, as if he wanted everyone there to know about them. Sometimes, when she couldn't take it anymore and voiced her displeasure, Li Boyan would pull her into his arms, pressing her tightly against his broad, muscular chest. "Because you're mine. I want the whole world to know," he said. "Because you're mine." That simple, cheesy line echoed in her mind, and to her frustration, it made her blush again. She had to admit Li Boyan's training was quite effective. After being brainwashed by him day in and day out, she gradually stopped resisting the idea of belonging to Li Boyan. Instead, she slowly began to accept it naturally, even. And just like that, their shameless life together passed a whole year without them even realizing. Then, on an ordinary day, Li Boyan suddenly invited her to go on a vacation to Paris. It would be their first trip together. Without thinking much, she agreed immediately. She didn't expect that the very next day, Li Boyan would drag her onto a cruise ship, trapping her in a long sea voyage. She immediately felt like she had miscalculated. This had to be a carefully planned conspiracy. But it was too late for regrets. Standing on the deck of the ship bound for Paris, the sea breeze gently brushed her delicate skin, blowing away the fatigue of the journey. Li Boyan stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, the warmth of his palm reaching straight to her heart. This time, he had finally caught her, held her firmly in his grasp. She closed her eyes on the deck, quietly enjoying a rare moment of peace shared just between the two of them. As the sun set, the golden dusk spilled over their shoulders, casting a soft glow on their clothes, elegant and beautiful. After a while, it was nearly time for dinner. Li Boyan curved his lips into a slight smile and wrapped an arm around her waist as they turned back. She had once hated such physical intimacy, but after Li Boyan repeatedly broke through her boundaries, she somehow got used to it. The luxury cruise offered a romantic candlelight dinner. The white candlelight flickered in her eyes. Li Boyan raised his wine glass, the red wine swirling gently as he took a sip. The atmosphere was thick with tension, intimate and ambiguous. She lowered her head, her face tinged with a faint blush. They shared the meal in silence. Afterward, the server brought out a delicate little cake, topped with her favorite fruits. She used her fork to cut into it, but it got stuck in the middle. There seemed to be something inside? She frowned, puzzled, and carefully pushed aside the cream with her fork. A pigeon egg-sized diamond ring was hidden inside the cake, sparkling even in the dim lighting. This? Before she could even react, the man across from her was already moving. Li Boyan stepped forward, taking the ring into his palm. Then he knelt down on one knee, his long, narrow eyes filled with a sincerity that was almost mesmerizing. Tiny light sparkled in his gaze. If everything before had felt like teasing, this moment was real, undeniably, seriously, and genuinely meant for her. The kind of romantic scene she had only ever seen on TV was now unfolding right in front of her. Bathed in the warm light, Li Boyan was enveloped in a soft glow. A classical love song, prepared in advance, began to play perfectly in sync with the moment. Li Boyan looked up, his deep eyes meeting hers. "Will you marry me? Miss Qingwan, I promise for the rest of this life, I'll give you all the best I have. I'll never let you suffer again. You'll be my one and only. No one else will ever disturb our life again." The solemn promise was spoken by him, word by word. But after hearing the very first sentence, a loud ringing filled her ears, drowning out all other noise. He said he had proposed. Unlike the rashness from before, this time he was fully prepared. He was serious. A crowd of people gathered around them, coaxing and cheering her on. "Say yes. Say yes. Just accept him already." She covered her mouth as a flood of tears had already ruined her makeup. Her shoulders trembled uncontrollably. There was no reason to refuse anymore. Laughing and crying at the same time, she reached out her fair, slender hands. Li Boyan carefully slipped the wedding ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. The crowd cheered again, "Kiss her. Kiss her." Without thinking, Li Boyan stood up and pressed his lips to hers. Warmth rushed over her as she wrapped her arms around his neck, quietly savoring the romance of the moment. After all the twists and turns, they had still ended up together. The past 3 years of hardship had nearly broken her spirit. Yet in the end, the one who saved her was still Lee Boyan. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or laugh at the irony, but fortunately, it was him in the end. And it could only ever be him. The kiss was exceptionally long. Only when she was nearly out of breath did Lee Boyan finally let go. Everyone, a night of spring is worth 1,000 gold coins. We'll be off now, Lee Boyan said with obvious delight in his eyes, lifting her up into his arms and carrying her back to their room. Since she had agreed, he was ready to claim his rights. The others burst into good-natured whistles and teasing, making her blush furiously once more. Those days that followed were exceptionally sweet. When they reached the shores of Paris, she shared the news with everyone, including Song Zixing. Seeing her radiant smile through the screen, Song Zixing couldn't help but smile with her. He had once loved her madly so much that he would have paid any price, accepted any consequence for her. But her heart had never been with him. He had long sensed it, but still clung to a stubborn hope for some kind of ending. Now the answer had finally come. He could let go. Wishing you a long and happy life together. After writing and deleting a long message, Song Zixing ultimately sent just this single line of sincere blessing. The moment the message was sent, he let out a deep breath. He had finally let go of the resentment from a love he could never attain. From that day on, the endangered Song Corporation began to shine with renewed hope. And it was all thanks to the young yet mature successor with a sharp business mind. Song Zixing. Ruan Qingwan, you bitch. This is all your fault. Su Yan sat hunched in a dark room, her hair a disheveled mess, cursing Qingwan's entire family with seething hatred. Ever since Lee Boyan had resolutely divorced her, she had plunged into a debauched lifestyle, frequenting nightclubs and indulging in excess. The alimony from Lee Boyan quickly ran out, and relying solely on her remaining beauty, she married an overweight, greasy, middle-aged businessman with a beer belly. Before the wedding, the rich man treated her like a queen, showering her with handbags and makeup almost every day. But as soon as they were married, he completely changed. Whether she was willing or not, he would force himself on her in all kinds of humiliating ways. For the sake of money, she had no choice but to submit. Fortunately, she got lucky and quickly became pregnant with the businessman's child. She had thought that things would finally settle down from there.